Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The liberate army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
шануєм і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. І душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. І покажем, що ми браття козацького
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 480 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And it's fundraiser night, and we've already hit $1,000. Yes!
And let's get it on up there to the $5,000 goal. And before I even start to give a light summary of the news tonight, I think it is very important for us to talk about our fundraiser for tonight. Tonight's fundraiser is for Razom for Ukraine. Razom for Ukraine is a nonprofit that actually is based in Ukraine and has been doing some amazing work throughout the course of the war. It is, and trying to sit here and think about everything they do, it's a pretty long list, actually, but here, I'll just show y'all. Oh, no, thank you. We're actually running a fundraiser for y'all right now.
Hey,
but
what do you know?
they're like, would you like to donate? It's like, little would you know. But anyways, here is their breakdown of where their funds go when they're raised. You can see that only 2.8%, probably one of the lowest numbers we've ever seen for a nonprofit, go to administrative work and fundraising efforts. And that is incredibly low. Only $1.7 million in 2022 was put towards their administration and fundraising efforts. 58% of that, nearly $36 million that they raised last year was put into medical support, including logistics. Another 28.5% was put into communication devices, vehicles, and generators. And then another 8% was put into food and shelter, 1% for advocacy, which is a very small amount, it's only $600,000. And then other programs accounted for 1.9%, which was around $1.2 million. And it is an amazing...
Wow, man, they have better stats than some U.S. charities.
I mean, hell, honestly, Doctors Without Borders is actually one of the best nonprofits we run as far as how much of their fundraising goes to their administrative overhead versus their actual field projects. But Razom for Ukraine, if this 2.8% number, which it is accurate, that means that they are probably the best fundraiser we've ever run for in terms of how much of it actually goes into field work. And almost 97% of it, it's like 97.2% of it, goes into field work in Ukraine. It's an absolutely amazing fundraiser, and it's actually the one that we're running tonight on the YouTube channel. And so if you would like to help Razom for Ukraine in their efforts to help save Ukrainian lives, you can do that. We've gotten up to $1,144 as of this moment, and tonight's goal is $5,000. If we can reach that, and getting, I guess you could say, the breakdown here of how their funds are distributed, we could assume that out of that $5,000, over $2,500 of that will be going into medical help for Ukraine. Around another $1,200 of that would be going into communication devices, vehicles, generators, and then you can kind of get the breakdown from there, and then it just goes on and on and on. But of course, an amazing fundraiser, and I hope we're able to blow our way through the fundraiser goal. We started off pretty strong tonight already, getting up to $1,164 now, and hopefully we can get all the way on up there. But getting on out of tonight's fundraiser, which is what the fundraiser stream is all about, it is now time for us to get into the news. We've been hearing some incredibly interesting news today from Ukraine, and specifically in the southern front. It appears that Ukrainian forces have been able to advance once more, and have also been able to take a couple of villages here in the area of Vasylivka, according to today's reports, and we also have some videos coming out of that today. Meanwhile, inside of the Russian Federation, Russian state TV is once again advocating for the use of preemptive nuclear strikes against Western NATO countries, and we can also see that a Russian tank factory appeared to be slightly operational today and churning out a very limited number of modern main battle tanks. Meanwhile, in the area farther south to Kherson, mostly towards the Chonhar Gap, we saw that a Russian ammunition depot was blown up in pretty terrific fashion today, and it appears that Ukrainian offensive efforts in the southern flank of Bakhmut are beginning at full speed again. And we'll be covering all of this tonight in detail, but I feel like probably one of the most interesting ones to start with would be the Russian news. And moving on into Moscow, we can of course hear that the Russian propagandists are calling for nuclear weapons to be used against the West in preemptive strikes. Here's the clip.
Again?
Again. It's again. I can't, like...
Jeez.
We've covered this maybe a million times at this point, but we have to cover it again because they're once again talking about it on Russian state TV.
Oh, it's that devil again, too.
What was the thing we always used to make fun of? Italy. I think it was something like that. The approach is very simple. I think tactical nuclear weapons will be used, and it is inevitable. I believe that tactical nuclear weapons must be used on the crossings over the Dnieper River, on entry points of railroad transports from Western countries which supply arms, on Borispil, on the places of concentration of Western equipment on the territory of Poland, Germany, Slovakia, that is being prepared for transportation for war against Russia, and the places of training of the Ukrainian Nazis on the territory of the country, including NATO countries. Very
Doesn't this
interesting.
guy realize that if they use nukes, that's basically going to mean the end of Russia?
Man, if they use nukes, if we saw a missile flying into Western territory, or multiples of them, and one of them landed in Poland, and it blew up, and it turned out to be a nuclear weapon, within minutes, the United States will probably be launching everything we have at Russia. It's like, that's not going to end all too well, especially considering that to reach the United States as training grounds, you would have to use an ICBM for that. And that pretty much means they're already beginning nuclear Armageddon off of this. This is just crazy talk. I have to show this to y'all, though, because this is what the Russians listen to on state TV. And while it's absolutely insane, this is what they're going with. And speaking of insanity, many of y'all may remember the insane move that the Russians made, and somehow this worked out logically in their heads, to put a Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft system onto the top of the Ministry of Defense building inside of Moscow. I think some of y'all may remember that, but just to refresh y'all's memory and also to give an update, it's still there. They put that thing on top of the building and it hasn't come down for months. And so here's the Pantsir. And also we have to mute the Lego City music, but you can see the Pantsir S-1 system up there on the roof, radar on and everything, and looking for air targets. It is legitimately crazy to sit there and look at this kind of, like, let me think of some other way to say it rather than throwing out a curse word. This just bat crazy stuff. And to think that this country used to be considered, before this war, one of the strongest and most powerful nations in the world. Holy moly!
Dang,
Dutch
Argent put in
Argent!
a $500.
A $500 donation, which means that this fundraiser is now at $2,000. Holy
Hey, let's go!
Lego! But still, absolutely bizarre to see the Russians putting Pantsirs on top of a building. I mean, the United States has kind of done stuff similar to this, we assume, around the Washington, D.C. area with NASAMS. But NASAMS aren't the same as a Pantsir. Many of y'all may know it's a self-propelled anti-aircraft system. And let me pull up the Pantsir S-1 right here. Let me go to images. And here it is. They actually took the truck. You know, they didn't take this little turret up here. They took the truck, and they just lifted it up there with a crane and just dropped it off on the roof. And it's been there for about 6 months at this point. That's a little wild.
That roof isn't designed to support that much weight.
Now, I have a feeling that that roof is not rated for the full weight of a Pantsir, what's practically, by European standards, an 18-wheeler. I don't think it's approved for that kind of weight, but it's still up there, and someone in that office cubicle below it is starting to notice that the paint's chipping off the ceiling, and there's little cracks forming. He's going, oh, bled, I think we might need new paint on the ceiling. Is that lead I'm tasting from the paint? But anyways, we're going to be moving on from that, because, of course, the weirdness doesn't end there. We actually saw Shoigu at the Nonapropasna in an unknown location, reviewing a Russian tank factory that was producing brand new T-80s, at least according to Now. So here is the clip. Now, one thing that's fairly interesting that I'd like to point out is that for them to be producing tanks, it's a very interesting assembly line because there's really nothing out here that facilitates them, I don't know, building tanks. You know, it's just literally just a line of chassis and some guys standing inside of it. And of course, you know, this may be...
Do we have to add ammo for these, bliat?
Oh, good lord, man. God forbid we actually have to use different kinds of tools and add different kinds of materials to the tank, bliat. We just put them in a line and they magically build themselves like Lego blocks or something.
Oh, we do not use snap-on tools, we use snap-off.
Man, snap-on, that's a little too rich. How about pop-off? And we can
That's a
see
good vodka.
and we can see now that they're using the shower towels that you lay under your shower, and they're starting to use those as some kind of a camouflage net.
Буквально требуется экипажу 4 часа, чтобы поставить накидку, поставить козырек, и, в принципе, машина готова.
And also, I've never seen this like canvas covering on any of the composite, well, not the composite, but more so the ERA blocks and tiles before. I have never seen that, and they're never shipped like that. So I'm wondering if this is like carpentry work that's under this to make it look like it has ERA tiles, and then they just covered it with fabric and some camo to make it look good. I'm thinking that may be what they did here. Like, look at this. Okay, listen. I understand completely that every part of an assembly line is not going to have loads and loads of stuff off to the side. However, there's nothing here for them to actually build these tanks with. Like, look, they got some boxes of screws, and that's it. Like, they're not building a tank with a box of screws. Like, if we go, let's go and see if we can find M1 Abrams factory floor, and let's see if we can actually go and get a picture of a factory floor producing Abrams. Now, notice...
There's actually equipment nearby.
Yeah, notice how there's actually racks of stuff nearby that they actually build the tanks with. Notice that. All right, now let's move on to another picture where you can see that they have this thing on a lift, and you can see loads of stuff everywhere. In the background, more so. This one appears to be off on its own on the factory floor, but way back there, you can see where there's actually parts and stuff that would be used to actually build a tank. Let's move on to another picture, because I gotta get this one. I gotta knock this one home. Better yet, let's look at this one. Now, here's the factory floor for Abrams to be produced in. And once again, equipment all around. It's an actual assembly line, mind you, and they're actually building them. Now, this is also probably just an upgrading facility, but what kind of upgrading are you doing with no parts or equipment around rather than like one box and a wrench? You're not doing anything rather than replacing some rusty screws in this thing, or nothing, and this is all being done for the cameras. Which is what I'm believing, because there's no way in hell they're actually upgrading or producing anything meaningful without proper assembly line logistics. Now you can see some loaded up on the trains. These have probably been here for 9 years now.
Из этих 153 15 вот они стоят на платформе, готовые к обзору. Мы создали запасы для вот этих наших формирований. Это дополнительно к ним. Ну, отлично. Машины все доработаны как конструктором наложены. Они просто навесного нету по той причине, что не габарит. Ставить будем.
And we can now see that they have brought the Chernobyl liquidators forward in time from 1986 to the present day with all their rusted Euro 4320s out here.
Jeez.
Как раз для ремонта автомобильной техники.
Automobile technique. Now we can see, oh my god, BTR 60s. Now, let me just say this real quick. A BTR 60, what the gun that you see in that turret is a 14.5 millimeter machine gun, and that's it. These things also have paper-thin armor as well, and this is once again being shown off as the great Soviet weaponry, or the great Russian weaponry now, although this is Soviet tech, that is going to be sent to the lines for the Russians to fight with. Keep that in mind. All Shoigu, you've become an engine mechanic, Blair.
Oh, he's like Kim Jong-un, he's a master of everything now.
Yeah, he's a master of all trades.
Or the jackass of all trades, perhaps.
Ooh.
Каждый батальон, полк, бригада, дивизия. Мы практически все поменяли. Сейчас у нас комплект остался.
And we can now see, what was that, D20s, D30s covered up in fabric?
То есть мы курсантов не просто работать привлекаем, они занятия проводят. То есть конспект, то есть у них практически занятия согласно их программе.
565 единиц. Причем это от минометов до
до крупного калибра. Вплоть до гиацинтов, тюльпанов, пионов.
I mean, you see, showing you with a very interesting walk. I was sitting there quiet for a minute because it's like, am I seeing this or is he limping like he's got a problem? Look at him.
Гиацинтов, тюльпанов.
I think he's crapped his pants. Like the way he's walking is the way you would walk if you've crapped your pants. Many people may have seen this during like press briefings before here in America. Whenever anyone like craps their pants and they just kind of waddle off. This guy's walking like that the whole time.
Пионов, акации и гвоздик.
We now see
Why does he
them
look so worried walking around? Like he looks like he's really like freaked out.
because he knows Russia's doomed. He's like, man, there's no way we can win a war with this stuff, man.
Потому что, слушайте, так относиться к этому.
And look, right behind him are some tulpans that have been in the graveyard so long, they are truly rusted over. I mean, like, the outside's nearly rusted over. It's been out there for so long, the paint's not even the same color it used to be when they actually made it. It went from, like, green to yellow back there. And this one, like, the numbering is chipping off the side.
У нас план 200. Какой 200? Разбирайтесь. Есть.
And look at that, all these great Russian weapons that'll be making their way to the front line in, oh, I'd say days in this condition. Like, literally, I'm not even kidding. They probably just sent it up in this condition to the front lines. The engine seals just gone, like they've rotted away. It's so sad, really, to see that the Russians believe that they are actually a world-class power with with world-class problems. I mean, like, there is no way you can even explain this as just a small hiccup. I mean, like, in America, if you see this kind of stuff, usually it's equipment we never even use. We would just buy bulk of stuff, and it would be like maybe 3,000 planes, and then we just throw them off in the woods or something and just forget about them. But this stuff is supposed to be stuff that the Russian army is using, and they're having to actually go out here and go, yes, let's take some of the best examples here and bring them into Ukraine because we have nothing left to work with.
Докладно. Есть. Что, когда, сколько, куда, кому. Если необходимо дополнительных людей сюда, вот Евгений Владимирович в этой части поможет.
Good God, I mean, I don't even know how in the world the Russians go around with a straight face, and he's not going around with a straight face. He looks like he's panicking, like, my job is over, my career is done for. The army...
One thing's for sure is they're well fed, at least, though. All the Russian commanders are very well fed.
Damn, man, I gotta tell you, whoever is in charge of their meals sat there, have some borscht, oh, thank you, have some more borscht, oh, thank you. And it's like, repeat that for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for several years. Because these guys are bulking, but it's not with muscles, it's just with guts. I mean, these guys, seriously, the reason why we may have not seen some of the stuff on the assembly lines back here is because they just ate the stuff on the assembly line, because their guts are oddly shaped like some boxes, like just boxes of like MREs that they're hiding under their shirts. Well, and also, wait a minute, Matthew. This guy looks like the liberal media. They're lying to you. He looks like him.
Somewhat.
He kind of does. He kind of does. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from the tank factory in Russia because, the only thing that's tanky around there is the guts of the Russian generals. And we're now going to be moving on from that little factory and on into the Russian border area near the checkpoint of Tetkino, where we saw some fires burning around the area. And we can see one picture here, and they call it cotton. Apparently this is some kind of a new code phrase, and I haven't really been able to pick up on what cotton means, but we can see that there was some kind of a damage that was caused to a building in the area. We can also see some windows busted out, and once again, another picture of a window being busted out. It actually appears to be one that is on this building, maybe on another side. But then again, the facade color is different, so I'm not exactly certain. Still, whatever is hit near the area of Tetkino in the Kursk region appears to have caused a little bit of damage, although we haven't been able to assess how severe that damage is. However, in the United Kingdom, in the Salisbury Plain, we saw a Challenger 2 in operation today, of course training some Ukrainian crews on how to operate the vehicle. And it has, I gotta tell you, Matthew, we've rarely ever been able to hear the Challenger 2 at full revs, but this thing rolling over the field sounds like a Spitfire from the 1940s. Just listen to the engine. Now that is a nice engine.
That is pretty nice. Nice and lovely.
Quite nice. And I gotta say, I really am a huge fan of the Challenger 2s. We know that there are Challenger 2s already in Ukraine. We haven't seen any of them used yet at the moment on the southern front, but we are assuming that they will eventually be used, and hopefully to great effect. The Challengers have some of the highest crew survivability rates in history at this moment. They also have only had 2 of them destroyed in combat, and both of those were destroyed by friendly fire. And so it hopefully will be an incredibly good system, and you can see that the British are still training forces on how to use it in the Salisbury Plain. Some of y'all may also be wondering, because we have a lot of American viewers, where is the Salisbury Plain? And this is actually a really cool little side story here to tell y'all about, just in case y'all ever travel over there. So you see, just north of the town of Salisbury right here, which is also a really neat place to visit, is Stonehenge, and many of y'all know what Stonehenge is, of course. And when you go there, I'll actually have to be honest with y'all, I would kind of skip Stonehenge because it isn't really the most exciting thing to see. It's actually way smaller than they make you think it is whenever you see it on videos or anything similar. But just north of that is the Salisbury Plain, and you can actually see the massive British Army, pretty much barracks and I guess you could say base that is in the Salisbury Plain, and they use the rest of this place all the way through here as a training field. And when we went to Stonehenge, way back, I think it was in like 2018, we were there, and it was an incredibly hot year. Someone actually passed out from heat exhaustion at the visitor center right here, and they just started waterboarding.
I think they started waterboarding them, yes.
They said, "Oh, you all right?" While just pouring a water bottle on her face. She's laying upright, and so you just hear her down there going, and I was like, she's not okay. Y'all are waterboarding this poor woman. But anyways, getting on back into the whole Stonehenge story, we were at Stonehenge, and there was all this smoke rolling over Stonehenge, just loads of it. You would think there was a wildfire going on. And so we asked someone up there, and we said, what's going on around here? Is there like a wildfire somewhere around here? And they said, oh, no, that's just the artillery. The artillerists are, out there training right now. And in the distance, you could actually hear the artillery firing. And that's how close Salisbury Plain and the training grounds are to Stonehenge, which is really cool. And you don't know that until you go there. But a really neat story nonetheless. I thought I'd just share that with you all about the Salisbury Plain. And I think we actually ended up driving through it. I think we may have taken this little road right here. Oh, no, wait a minute, no. I'm trying to think about this. I don't know which way we took in. Really, it may have been the A346, but I don't remember having to like turn that way to do that. I think we came from Bath. Yeah, we came from Bath down the A36, and then we ended up getting on the A303, and then we made it to Stonehenge. So we actually didn't go up through the Salisbury Plain. We went around it. But still, an incredibly cool story, and one that I haven't really forgotten because, then we went to Bovington Tank Museum down near Bournemouth, down here. Let me see where that is. Let's see. It's somewhere around here. Where in the world is Bournemouth? Wait, Bovington. Bovington, that's what we're looking for. Here's the Bovington Tank Museum right here, and then we went to that. And then, of course, James May was there that day, and then we didn't even get to see him because we arrived, I think a few hours too early.
I hated that, too, because I wanted to see James May so bad.
I know, man. I still hate that to this day. I regret that we weren't able to see James May. But anyways, just a little bit of a story about the Salisbury Plains, and also a video that we saw from there today of Challenger 2 still in training with their Ukrainian crews. And with that, we're now going to be moving on from the United Kingdom and on into Ukraine, and specifically into the Kherson Oblast before we get into the, by and large, counteroffensive information and news. The counteroffensive has been going on, of course, for a good while at this point, maybe 2 weeks, if I was to take a rough estimate as to the timetable. And the Ukrainians have been trying to mess with and interdict Russian supply lines behind the lines, so that way those Russian forces that they're having to fight through aren't able to fight as well or as hard. And we can see that they were able to get a pretty decent amount of progress in that direction today, as they were able to cause an ammo fire near this village of Rakhove. Rakhove is actually on the railway corridors and the railway supply line that we have highlighted right here in red, because just about a week ago, the major rail bridge in this area was actually destroyed by Ukrainian missile fire. It's somewhere around the area of Rakhove. I believe it's actually a little bit north towards Druzhba, but it's in between Rakhove and Druzhba, and it knocked out the supply corridor in Crimea. However, just a little bit further south, the supply depot, or the ammo depot of Rakhove, which we're assuming is right near the railway tracks in that area, was hit, and it does appear to have exploded in fantastic fashion. We've rarely ever seen anything explode like this, and I'll be trying to find the village of, here it is, the village of Rakhove right here. And you can see the railroad tracks passing through the area, and we're assuming that the supply base was most likely this building right here. Considering that's isolated and it's also near the railroad tracks, it would take a very small truck force to move any of the railroad supplies from the railhead and then to the supply depot and then distribute it later. But here are some of those pictures and videos that we saw of this ammunition fire and subsequent explosion.
Пиздец, партизаны горят. Горят партизаны. Все, нету села, блядь. Ебануться. Тупо села нету. Кончили, блядь, село. У меня аж руки трусятся. Бля, нету села. Все. Это жесть. Что ж вы делаете, а? Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой. Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой. Клубы дыма. Все. Это все.
And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. But you could see that the ammunition was continuing to burn. And according to reports, this ammunition actually burned for a significantly long time, for several hours, before it ended up going up in a terrific explosion. And I believe we actually have a picture of that right here. And so let me go to this picture. Actually, I think this shows a clip from the village of Rakovy, and then it shows the explosion here in a second. Unfortunately, it does not. It appears I wasn't able to get the explosion picture. But we can see the ammunition burning in the distance. We can see some rockets flying out of the supply depot there. Once again, showing that it's pretty much raw ammunition. Due to the early morning hours, however, the smoke does appear to be a little bit of a darker black color, but later on in the normal light of day, we were able to see that the smoke was mostly white, and so it is mostly an ammunition fire from what we're able to understand. But with that, that is the end of that little clip right there, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians were able to strike a massive Russian ammo depot. The Russians have actually improved their strategy as far as ammo storage goes, from what we can tell, a little bit. In the efforts of trying to stop massive ammo explosions like that, they've started to disperse their ammunition stockpiles into smaller groups and smaller amounts, but they're in the open air, and we call those open-air ammo depots. That, of course, has led to the Ukrainians being able to find a lot of these and end up destroying them, but apparently it hasn't led to the massive kind of supply losses like we saw earlier on in the war, when the Russians would take all of their ammunition and stockpile it into one single building. But still, it is pretty nice to see that they were able to blow up one of those massive supply depots further towards Crimea, and hopefully that'll start to inflict some damage on the Russian supply lines that are on the southern front, and also the Russian forces fighting there. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the area of Ola Pristan, and unfortunately, we have to change our tone here a little bit, because this, of course, was some rather unfortunate information, and I would like y'all to know that we're about to be showing some images that some people may consider somewhat overwhelming. They are not graphic, however, I will make that clear, but it does show somewhat more mature pictures, I guess you could say. And so here are some of the pictures of Ukrainian relief efforts in the area of Ola Pristan, and we can see them carrying out body bags from houses. From what we understand, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are now being found along the southern bank of the Dnipro River that have ended up dying due to the water rising and them drowning inside their houses. Like the caption says, we assume that most of the casualties from this, what was pretty much a flash flood from the dam exploding, would be elderly or disabled people who wouldn't really be able to get themselves out otherwise. But, of course, we can see that the toll upon the Ukrainian citizenry was rather high, and once again, another proof of another Russian war crime. Razom for Ukraine, speaking of our fundraiser tonight, is actually in the area of Nova Kakhovka and is actively involved in the rescue efforts. And if we go back to Razom for Ukraine, because I would like to make another plug for them tonight, considering that they are helping out in that area, they actually are asking for funds in an effort to try and help out in the Nova Kakhovka area. Let me see if we can...
Would you like to help the victims of the flooding?
And
Donate
look,
now.
they're actually asking about it right here. So it says, help the victims of the flooding caused by Russia's destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. Razom is providing aid today. Evacuations in housing, drinkable water, and hygiene supplies. And we are already working with the emergency services to support their ongoing work. We are responding to the rapidly changing needs on the ground, but we need your help. And that is what this fundraiser is largely, once again, for tonight. It's mostly for humanitarian assistance. Ransom for Ukraine largely focuses almost entirely on humanitarian aid and assistance, and of course, that is what all of our fundraisers focus on, and that is what this one is focusing on tonight. We've reached $2,600 so far, and
Hey, let's go, Jugga Jugga.
Igor! And hopefully we can reach the remainder of around the 2,400 before tonight ends. And of course, it'll go to help Razom, to help save the people in Nova Kakhovka, the ones that may still be in jeopardy. And also, it'll help them to go on to help out Ukrainians in other parts of the country as well. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little plug for Razom, because of course it's an amazing nonprofit that has been working in Ukraine around the clock to try and alleviate the terrible situations that have been happening throughout the war, either they be missile attacks or the Nova Kakhovka Dam blowing up, amongst many other things. They have been there the entire time and helping out significantly. But with that, we're now finally going to be moving on into the counter-offensive news and what's been going on down here in the southern front. We've been getting some fairly interesting information today, both good and bad. The Ukrainians have been able to make ground, and that's probably one of the more important things to take from today. But one thing that's interesting, though, is many of y'all have had some questions, and many people around the internet have had loads of questions about what's been going on in the Ukrainian counteroffensive, because the Ukrainians don't really come out with a lot of information about it, of course due to operational security reasons. And it appears that Matthew's been asking y'all about these leading questions of the day that we've been seeing around Twitter, and a load of y'all have been answering them, almost 2,000 on some of the polls. And so with that, tell us, Matthew, what are folks thinking about some of the leading questions of the night?
All right, so we do have several polls to address, but first, Enforcer, we do have a little list here of top donors of the night thus far, and would you like me to call those out?
Sure.
All right, so let me grab a bot, by the way. There we go. So, starting off with our first top donor of the night, we have a 500 from Dutch Argin. That is the largest one of the night thus far, and thank you very much for that very generous donation to Razom. We have a 150 from DCC Prime 1, as well as a 100 from Jburn, some guy called the Enforcer, GTO Joe 04. We also have a 50 from What's on Tap, Nebraska. And what is on tap, by the way. But anyways, we also have a 50 from Dad Good. We have one from Dale Terra Swift. I can't even begin to pronounce that one. Sorry, Dale, about butchering that last name. We have a 50 from Martin57, a 50
Trister
from Tim Q,
won!
and a 50 from Rick Clay. And what happened?
500 from Trister. Good lord.
What?
We just got up
That's
to 3.2.
Let's go.
Let's go. We are only, let's see, Wait, no, we wouldn't be 2 point, I don't think. I think we're around 1.8 thousand away from the goal. And absolutely impressive. And I got to thank, and Hal Rose just put in 100. Hey, let's get it. And I've got to thank everyone. I've got to thank everyone who's helping to support Razom for Ukraine tonight, because it is an absolutely amazing thing what many of these nonprofits have been doing to help save the lives of these innocent people in Ukraine. And Razom, of course, has been front and center in helping out a massive deal in Ukraine. And from what we can tell, based off of their funds, I guess you could say, graph, they put more into their field efforts than I think any other fundraiser we've ever fundraised for, which is absolutely incredible and definitely deserving of a lot of praise and a lot of support from folks here in the LSA, because they are putting as much as they can into actually helping people on the ground. No question at all. And I've got to thank everyone so far who's supported the fundraiser tonight, because you folks make these fundraisers possible, and y'all also make it possible that people's lives in Ukraine may be saved. This channel didn't raise $1 million for nothing. That $1 million, well over $1 million at this point, has gone on to save countless lives in Ukraine, both through Doctors Without Borders, who's helped to evacuate wounded Ukrainian soldiers and citizens out of the country, and to better medical care and aid inside of NATO countries like Poland, through UNICEF, who's been able to help out the children inside of the area of the Dnipro floodplains, and all the way to Razom for Ukraine tonight, who is also helping out in those floodplains and helping out in any conceivable way. Not only that, but Razom for Ukraine actually provides a really interesting, very neat service that I find incredibly nice, which is that they actually provide scholarship funds for Ukrainian soldiers and veterans, so that way they can go to college and pick up a valuable trade or a valuable degree after the war, so that way they can position themselves to take care of their families incredibly well. And I gotta say, it is absolutely incredible to know that so many people care about what Razom for Ukraine has been doing and help to join us here on, once again, another fundraiser tonight to help fundraise for them, so that way they can continue on those great efforts in helping to save Ukrainian lives. From what we've been able to see, there have been some questions. It looks like we may have had some new people in tonight about how our fundraisers run. And our fundraisers run through YouTube Give. It is the most transparent way to run a fundraiser. YouTube actually does all of the accounting, and they collect 100% of your donation, and they send it to the nonprofit in question. They cover all transaction fees, and they also cover all of the accounting fees as well, because there's actually a lot of effort that has to go into accounting, because there's actually a lot legally involved whenever you're fundraising. So they cover all of that, and so if you send in, like Chuck Parker did, $20 will end up going to Razom. And on top of that, YouTube does all of the accounting and actually all of the managing of the account. So it is probably the most transparent and most hands-off way anyone could fundraise on YouTube. That's why we've ended up doing this for 480 days at this point, because I don't like the idea of people having to trust someone to fundraise. There are some YouTube channels out there that run off of that principle. You know, they can do whatever they want, but I don't like the idea of people having to come in here and inherently trust us to be able to support Ukraine. And so that's why we end up running our fundraiser through YouTube Give, because if you couldn't trust YouTube, well, you could probably sue them for their shirts at that point. So I have a feeling that they're probably making sure that they're very trustworthy. And also they have to legally report all of that as well during, I believe, during tax season, as a part of their donations to nonprofits and all that kind of stuff. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And I got to thank you all so much once again for helping out this fundraiser like y'all have tonight. And hopefully we can get this thing on up towards $5,000. We got up to $3,600 now, so we're only about $1,400 away from the goal. And we're not doing that bad, actually. But with that, it is now time for us to get into our leading questions of the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and real quick, also a big shout out to Darren Menard, who put in a $50 donation to the fundraiser as well, and thank you, Darren, very much for that generosity. And with that being said, we're finally moving on to our first poll of the night, which says Ukraine is implementing water restrictions due to the dam collapse, and supposedly water is unsafe to drink. And what are your thoughts? 69%. Nice. Said the dam was basically a WMD. 16% said it was to be expected, not major. 9% said, that's bad, but not horrible. And 7% said unsure and undecided. And so far, it sounds like there was just one region, as well as some beaches around Odessa, that are having to be closed and also cordoned off because of these water restrictions. Apparently, the water is so polluted with different chemicals that it's very unsafe to drink, and apparently boiling it will not help the situation. So, very bad. Hopefully that doesn't spread to other regions. I'm not really sure exactly if it could or not, but it's definitely not good. To me, it seems like the dam collapse was basically a small version of a WMD, weapon of mass destruction, and I think it should be responded to as such. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it is a very pressing issue, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians are already starting to implement water restrictions, considering that water supply is going to be incredibly limited now due to the dam being blown up. And on top of that, a lot of the water in the Dnipropetrovsk Gulf and also further south of the Kakhovka Dam is incredibly contaminated with all kinds of nasty crap. In fact, we're hearing that the Russian army is starting to have cholera outbreaks, or there's actually cholera outbreaks within Kherson and Crimea within Russian-occupied territory. And that is kind of being linked to the Kakhovka Dam being blown up and the water supply is now being tainted. As some of y'all may know, cholera is a very serious disease, and it's a pretty nasty one. Well, not a disease. Let me actually pull up what cholera is, because I know someone's about, oh, you ready? So let me pull up cholera, and let's read about it. It's a diarrheal illness caused by the infection of the intestine with the toxigenic bacterium Vibrio cholerae, serogroup 01 or 0139. An estimated 1.3 to 4 million people around the world get cholera each year, and 21,000 to 143,000 people die from it. There's actually a pretty big discrepancy in that number right there in between the minimum and the maximum, because most of the places where people die from cholera, the government isn't really in the best shape, so they don't really collect the numbers all too well, so it's kind of guesswork at that point. But of course, cholera is a pretty serious bacterial illness, or, well, yeah, it's bacterial illness, and it is pretty concerning to hear that there are people getting it within Kherson and Crimea, and it sounds like we were saying earlier, the dam blowing up was just the beginning of the humanitarian crisis in that area. It's going to get far worse as time starts to pass, and I think that is a very good and proactive step made by the Ukrainian government to ensure that this doesn't get out of hand rapidly. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And also, the Observer said, you basically crap your guts out.
Gosh.
It's pretty bad. It's kind of like dysentery. Dysentery is very similar as well, where you pretty much, crap yourself until you dehydrate to death. And that's what dysentery is as well. And I got to tell you, diseases like that used to be very prevalent in the Victorian era, and it was a pressing social issue in every single country around the world to fix those issues and find out where they were coming from. The British were actually the ones who found out where cholera came from, and it was because water was being contaminated with sewage. And what's really sickening about that story, actually, to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, is that when they found that out, it was at a specific water pump in London. And the reason why they found out that it was actually the mixture of sewage and drinking water is because one particular woman in the study group of everyone who was dying around this pump died nearly, I think it was 3 miles away. And when they went out there, their daughter, the daughter of the dead lady, she said, oh, she always loved me going to that specific water pump where everyone was dying around it and getting that water because it tasted a little bit sweeter. And the reason why it tasted sweeter is because it was the decomposition of sewage inside of the water that was changing the flavor to make it taste a little bit sweeter, but it was cholera ridden, and it ended up killing the old lady. And that's how they found out that sewage getting into the drinking water was what was causing cholera and what was killing loads of people. And so then they started to come up with new sewage regulations and restrictions on where sewage could be dumped and how and everything else. And of course, as time has gone by, restrictions on how, I guess you could say, sewage can be treated has gotten far more strict, especially here in the Western world. And now you can see that within the Russian-occupied area of Ukraine, and it may even spread over to the Ukrainian-controlled side as well, all of that's practically gone out of the window with the dam being destroyed. Those systems in those areas were not supposed to be overrun with just floodwaters covering the entire area. It was never designed that way when that modern sewage came around in those regions. And so now we're starting to see that there's a massive problem because of what happened in the Kakhovka Dam. And I hate to say it, it's most likely going to get worse as time goes by. And hopefully the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian-controlled side can be proactive enough to try and limit its effects, although it will still happen nonetheless. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And also give you all a little bit of a story to back up kind of like the history of cholera and how bad it is. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, real quick, before we move on to our next poll, shout out to Cindy Mitchell, who put in a $50 donation to the fundraiser and brought us up to $3,710. You do the math, because I can't. We're very close to goal. We're getting close.
We are 1.3.
Also, shout out to Philip Fix's LSA as well for putting in a 20. But what were you saying, Enforcer?
We are only 1.3 away. And Matthew, I think it is time, Matthew, for a general...
I think it is.
I think it is, for a general order. General order... Number 20. We're just going to pick a random number tonight because I forgot the last general order we ever called up that had a number. But general order, number 20, is in effect. If you have $5 in the LSA, send it into this fundraiser. We're going to get it on over the goal here real quick. So let me go ahead and throw in 20 right there. 1 second. Let me make sure to get that done properly so that way my name shows up. Let's see. Continue.
It's got to be coming soon. Let's see.
It's got to be coming soon. I think it's going to show up as anonymous, but oh well. We'll just throw in a $20 right here.
Oh.
And let's see here. Yep, it's anonymous. It's anonymous.
Hey!
And it didn't allow me to show my name. But if you have $5 to send it in now, and let's keep it going until we reach the $5,000 goal. We are only $1,250 away from it right now, and we're closing rapidly. So let's get it on up there, and let's get this fundraiser knocked over the goal. The Lee Spring Army has never failed to miss a goal. And hopefully we don't fail to miss a goal again tonight. But with that, I hope we addressed that last poll fairly well. While that general order goes absolutely crazy, and it looks like we've already gotten up to $4,000. And so hopefully we'll get on up to $5,000 here soon. But with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and real quick, let me get one thing out of the live chat real fast. There we go. And our next poll says, while I try to catch up here, let me grab this little bot. Oh goodness! Oh my goodness! I'm multitasking to the extreme.
I get no respect around here.
I tell you. But anyways, moving on to that second poll, it says reports say Russia is relying heavily on defensive fortifications to defeat Ukrainian offensive. And what are your thoughts? 57% said, of course, Russia can't fight an offensive right now. 30% said it sounds like Ukraine is punching through. 11% said unsure, and 2% said that's not true. Russia is advancing. And I can assure you all that Russia is definitely not advancing. But also, Russia really can't fight an offensive of any sort right now. And that's why they went and built those extreme defensive fortifications with mines, etc., to make sure that they can bunker down and try to withstand the absolute horde of Ukrainian soldiers that are going to be launched at them. Right now, it looks like they're holding up, but I don't think that'll last. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm not really expecting it to last for long, and of course we knew that this was going to be a fairly difficult offensive. Some people have been treating that as a shock, but we did hear Zelenskyy beforehand saying that it was going to be a fairly difficult offensive. To be honest, I didn't expect it to be this difficult, but it appears that Zelenskyy did, and so it appears that the Ukrainian government was already keyed in, and the Ukrainian military was also keyed in as well, about how difficult this was most likely going to be. I have a feeling the Russians won't be able to keep this defensive up for too long, but it is still proving to be a little bit more difficult nonetheless. And so with that, I hope I addressed that one fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And we're killing it. We're killing it. We're up to $4,555 on the fundraiser. And real quick, shout out to, oh my God!
Oh,
did you see that?
David
My
Smith!
voice cracked like crazy. David Smith put in a 500.
We hit the goal! Let's go!
Jugga,
LSA! 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 We did it! We hit the goal! I can't believe it. That's actually absolutely incredible. And I gotta thank everyone, especially David Smith, who just threw us right over that goal, for supporting tonight's fundraiser. And of course, it's going to help save countless Ukrainian lives. Who knows how many it'll actually save. But it's absolutely incredible to know that so many people care about Ukraine on the 480th day of the war and are helping us to continue to help out Ukraine. And thank you, everyone, so much once again. And Month Bab just threw it 100. Good Lord.
Dang.
And I got to thank everyone incredibly. It's truly unbelievable that we've been able to once again reach, and let me make sure I get the number correct, $5.3 thousand tonight so far on the fundraiser, and help to save Ukraine. And it's great to know that a lot of people have, of course, done it through this channel, because we've been doing it like that for 480 days, and we've raised over $1 million. If y'all can't tell, you know, well, anyways, we'll just move on from that. But anyways, thank you everyone once again. And with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and with that being said, real quick, I want to call off some top donors that we've had in the meantime. I want to give a shout out to Evanescent Wave, who put in a 50, as well as the Ukester, who put in a 35. Hal Rose put in a 100. David Smith, of course, put in that very generous 500, and we had a 100 from Muth Bab. And thank you all very much for that very generous support of the fundraiser. And also, big thanks to everyone else as well for putting in even a $5 donation, because without those, we would have not hit goal. And we're now $342 above the goal. So a big ol' yeah!
And once again, absolutely incredible. And I gotta thank you all for helping to support this fundraiser tonight and helping to save lives through Razom. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on into the next poll.
All right, and our last poll says Russia can't afford night vision. What a shocker. Are night attacks Ukraine's only chance to break through Russian lines? 56% said yes, that's Ukraine's big break. 27% said no, anytime is a good time. 11% said unsure, and 5% said I'm indifferent to this. And I'm definitely a big proponent of doing things in a very smart way. And if Russia doesn't have night vision and Ukraine does have night vision, it makes sense to make night attacks so that way they can catch the Russians off guard. They can barely fight during the day, and they're really screwed at night because they can't see. So I think that's Ukraine's big break. They should exploit that to the extreme. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's a big break for them, and they should start to try and conduct more night battles if they can. But once again, it is easier for everyone to operate in the daylight. So I think that But any time is really a good time for them, but honestly, I would still have to go with 50%, 57% to say it would be a big break for the Ukrainian military, because it most likely would be. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so with that being said, we are all out of polls for now. But up first, from our live chat questions, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight we had Mark Hodges, C. Fay, JP's Gone Fishing, Cliff Simonson, Earl Banu, and Paul Schultz. They said tonight's Morse code cipher says the front lines are moving slowly, but the Russians are being pushed back anyways.
That's the sound of money, and y'all got that 100% correct. Hopefully the Ukrainians will be able to push back the Russians in time, and hopefully we'll see them split the Russian lines in two around the Melitopol, Mariupol, or Berdyansk area. Either way, I'll be fine with it. And so with that, I hope that does address that Morse code fairly well, and thank you all for deciphering that on the 480th day of the war. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in our live chat question, the first one goes to Don Lupnitz, who says, does Ukraine have an equivalent to air cavalry so they can go behind enemy lines and raise hell?
Ukraine does have an equivalent to air cavalry. They have airborne infantry, but it isn't really the same way people would think airborne infantry would operate. Like how they would. Like, for example, the VDV, once again, largely proved that dropping off soldiers behind lines with little support is a really hard thing to pull off successfully, and they didn't really pull it off that well at the Hostomel airport. So I would say that the Ukrainians could probably try and do something like that. They don't really have a lot of helicopters to do it with, but they could try and attempt it nonetheless. Whether it be successful or not, I think is another story, because even though they are Ukrainian soldiers, it still would be pretty tough to hold a position like that, especially if things went south for the Ukrainians that were supposed to push forward and relieve them just a little while later, and then they started to be held up due to stronger resistance. It could go the same way as Operation Market Garden, and it could go the same way as the VDV landing at Hostomel. Those kinds of operations are historically quite risky, and unless if you're going up against a enemy force that has absolutely no air superiority whatsoever, no air defense, and very weak ground forces, it is a fairly difficult one to pull off. And while the Russians are weak and incompetent amongst a bunch of other things, if for some reason the Ukrainians did get into more unexpected resistance, the results would be the same as every other operation that has failed. So quite risky, but they could try it with the airborne infantry. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. Pretty good one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and just a quick reminder that if you have a question for us tonight, it is Fundraiser night, so we're not doing any super chats. So put @EnforcerMatt in the chat and your question behind it, and we'll add it to the spreadsheet. And the odds are tonight we'll probably get to it because we need a lot more questions. I have about 25 thus far, so I need probably about 20 more. But anyways, our next one goes to Lottie Reckless, who says, what type of armored vehicles can cross the shallow parts of the Dnipro now that water levels are low?
The kind of armored vehicles that could cross the Dnipro are mostly amphibious APCs. One of those amphibious APCs would be the BTR series of armored personnel carriers. This one right here is the BTR-60. This is actually an East German BTR-60, but these are used quite prolifically by both sides, kind of just as a quick scoot guys up to the lines, drop them off, and then this thing leaves. They could also use any variant of BMP. The BMP-1 and the BMP-2 are both amphibious, and I'll try and get y'all a picture here of a BMP in the water. Well, actually, this one will be good enough. But as you can see, the little breakwater flap that lifts up onto the front of the BMP-1 and allows it to cross rivers. This thing does not have a propeller, and interestingly enough, some of the BTR-60s and BTR-80s, I think it's actually all of them, have a built-in propeller in the rear part of the vehicle. But I don't think these have them. I think they just use the tracks for propulsion through the water. I'm not really sure, though. So correct me if I'm wrong. And let's see, what else? What other kind of vehicles could they use? Really, those would be the main ones that would come to mind, at least at the moment right now, would be BTRs and BMPs. But it's not the only thing they would be able to use, because let's say the Ukrainians cross the river, say, in between Nikopol and Vodnyne. They could use the BMPs to drive out over the marsh, well, more so the flat, and then over the remainder of the reservoir, just float through it if it's too deep, and then get to the other side, form a, they kind of form like a perimeter on this side, and then they could try and start to ferry other forces across by either making some kind of a temporary levee through this area, so that way tanks don't sink in the sand, or if the reservoir is still high enough in some areas, make that levee and then cross by a barge or a small ferry that they could make, and then move across the levee to the other side and into Vodiane. And I'm trying to get that right. We'll just say Kamyanka Dniprovska, because that's a lot easier to say. But they could do something like that. It is still going to be a little bit more difficult, however, and that's one thing I always heavily emphasize whenever we start talking about special planning, like an amphibious operation or an airborne operation, is that those are quite difficult to pull off really well. And it doesn't come down to the training of the soldiers, it comes down more so to adhering to a very strict timetable, because offensive operations like that, everything must be done in a very short amount of time. Because if those BMPs cross that river and then create a perimeter around here, that means that Russian forces will be moving in to try and crush that perimeter before more Ukrainian forces cross. And so if for some reason Ukrainian forces in the reservoir start to come under heavy shelling or something similar, they won't be able to make it over there in time before this perimeter is crushed by Russian forces, because the Ukrainians would just be too undergunned to really hold that area for long, and probably too undermanned as well against the Russian attack force. And so you really have to put into the equation, would the timing happen perfectly in a situation like that? And if it didn't, how long would the Ukrainians have until the entire operation just flat out failed? And that is something that you always have to add into the equation. So while they could do something like that, and those are the vehicles that could cross, it is a fairly risky operation to make, and the Ukrainians would have to have the complete element of surprise, and a lot of things would have to go their way. Almost everything would have to go their way for that kind of operation to be successful. But with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And I think that may have been the last question of the segment, or we have one more.
It was actually our last one.
No way. I call cap. That went by pretty quickly.
No capping.
But with that, we're now going to be moving on out of that little area, out of that question segment, and we're now going to be moving on into the southern front. Ukrainian forces have been able to make some advances in this area today, and it does appear that they're making some ground. However, we have also heard from British intelligence that they are taking somewhat higher losses than would be expected, and we actually, I think, have that as a poll, and we'll be covering that a little later. However, in the area of Lipkove, where we did see Ukrainian forces advancing the other day, they were able to once again advance a little bit further. They took this area, the village of Lipkove, which was already mostly abandoned, and they were now able to take the village of Piatsakati, which is right up on a ridge just above Lipkove. We saw today, for the first time ever, some AMX-10s being used on the front line. And so here's the clip. And also that is a chant of the Onion, which is a classic French military song. And we can see the cameraman peeking out of the tree line. We can see an AMX-10 passing right there, le quack. And we can now see another AMX-10 passing right there, le quack quack.
Didn't you used to play video games with a guy named Le Quack?
Yeah, I think I did. I actually think about it. I think I did. But there is an entire column of AMX-10s right there. And really neat to see, because we have never actually seen AMX-10s used on the front line on video evidence until today, which is really cool and really nice to see, because I'm a big fan of the AMX-10s. With that, moving on to our next clip from the area, we also saw that Russian forces tried to hold the area as best they could, but once again failed outright and began to retreat off the field. One of the T-80s that was retreating off this field ended up hitting a mine, and the crew had to bail, with the tank being destroyed in the process. Also, I'm going to have to mute that because that's that music. But anyways, we can see the T-80 moving across the field. And in a second, it's about to hit a mine right about there. And pieces go flying. The tank comes to a stop. And now we can see the crew bailing out. We can actually see the gunners still operating the turret, however. And now we can see the tank being abandoned by the crew and the soldiers that were running on top of it. I guess you could say that they're not leaving on the horse they rode in on. But you now see a Ukrainian drone coming close to the tank. We're not really sure at this moment if it's an FPV kamikaze drone or not, but we can see them observing the abandoned T-80. You now see it flying off and spinning back around, once again observing the T-80, and it appears that it may be a kamikaze drone, because it looks like they're trying to line it up for a good hit. And it's coming on in, and it appears to hit right on the rear end of the engine bay. We can now see another FPV drone coming in. We didn't see this one earlier, but this was at the time that the infantry had dismounted from the top of the tank and the crew was still inside, and it appears that this one went for a couple of guys at the front. Now we can see another drone. It looks like this one's trying to fit itself into the hatch in the top of the tank so that way it can cause an ammo detonation.
That's some wild flying they're doing, like whipping around like that.
Man, I gotta tell you, man, they whipping it, man. And we can see them coming up towards the hatch again. And they're trying to set this thing down nice and easy inside of the hatch. And oh, wait a minute, I think they did it. Oh, they did! It's an ammo detonation.
Jeez.
They got it. What a hit. That was really wild to see. That took some flying skill.
They was smoking like a smoker.
Man, that thing be smoking the meats. They're going to be pulling out the sweet baby rays in a minute. And with that, that's the end of that clip. But really nice to see that they were able to get some impressive drone skills in after that AT mine partially damaged the tank. And they were able to take it on out with that drone. Pretty impressive flying by the Ukrainian drone pilots there. And once again, another $3.5 million to show for it. We're now going to be moving on to our last clip from this area around the direction of Lipkove, where we saw that another Russian T-72 was also destroyed by guided artillery in this area. When you see the Russian tank right there in the trees, we can hear the Chad music playing, and we can now see it being hit by an artillery shell, and that thing will now be cooking on up. Man, and you're telling me a shrimp fried this rice? I doubt it. But anyways, another T-72 knocked out, and great to see. And I honestly think that joke may have just not even fitted that occasion right there. This was about shrimp fried rice. And I was like, that doesn't even fit. I'm not going to lie. But with that, we're now going to be moving on a little bit further down the southern front and into the direction of Kharkiv, where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers having to hunker down because the Russians are beginning to use cluster munitions in the area of the Zaporizhzhia front line. Cluster munitions were actually banned in 2001 due to multiple miniature explosives being left behind, largely unexploded from these kinds of ordnance that could later kill citizens long after the war was over. It appears that the Russians, of course, in an attempt to try and play dirty with the Ukrainians, are pulling out cluster munitions and using them against the Ukrainians again. And we hear that right here.
Вот так вот нас кассетами кроют.
You see the Ukrainian soldiers talking about it.
Слава Украине!
Да тихо, тихо, птичка летает.
Летает она. Зараза, сука. Представляете, мне тут нервничать нахуй.
We can hear them listening to explosions still occurring. And with that, that's the end of the clip. And of course, very unfortunate here the Russians are using cluster munitions. And I just saw someone say cluster munitions are not banned. Let me go and check because I went and did some research today and I heard that they were banned in 2001, I believe. Are cluster munitions banned? The Convention on Cluster Munitions, CCM, is an international treaty that prohibits all use, transfer, production, and stockpiling of cluster bombs, a type of explosive weapon which scatters submunitions, bomblets, over an area. And let's see here, in 2022, 2008 treaty to prohibit them and destroy existing stocks. Let's see here. So let me go to this map here because it actually shows the signatories, and we can see, let me go and try and check out, signatories to the convention are in blue, and the states' parties are in purple. So
the Ruskies sat this one out.
Yeah, apparently they sat it out, we sat it out, and also the Ukrainians sat it out. So it would be a war crime for the signatory parties to use these kinds of cluster munitions, but apparently it wouldn't be a war crime for either the Russians nor the Ukrainians to use it. So you actually are correct down there in the live chat. We would not be committing a war crime if we used it because we never signed the treaty, and the Russians and the Ukrainians would also not be war criminals either. For most countries in the world, it would be a war crime, but not for any of the involved parties. But still, with that, we're going to be moving on from that very interesting clarification, and we're now going to be moving on into the direction of Huilopol, where we saw another Russian tank getting blown up in the southern front again today. There was no audio on this clip, and we can see a Russian vehicle moving right down there. It's the T-72, and we can now see it getting hit by something. We now see the tank coming to a stop. And we can see what appears to be a trench work in that tree line that the drone was looking at for a moment.
Oh, I see movement in the trees.
And I see some movement there too. I don't know if those are Ukrainians or Russians. The tank was moving towards that trench, and now we can see that the tank is well on its way to blowing up. It appears that the ammunition is burning off inside of the tank. Oh my god!
What the hell was that?
Someone call up General MacArthur. They're using nuclear tanks. Holy moly!
Was that a thermobaric that blew
I
up?
don't even know, man. That was insane. I did not expect that at all.
Damn.
That was a surprise. Let's watch that again. Good God.
That had to be a thermobaric. That was not a regular explosion.
I don't even know what that would be. I'm going to have to be completely honest. I have no idea what blew up in that tank, but I've never seen a tank blow up like that before. Man, I think we were sitting there, I was like, you know, the ammo's just blowing up, and then it just goes nuclear. It's like, good Lord.
Man, anybody around that probably had their ears, like, busted out from that.
Man, that was like that Beirut explosion in Lebanon in 2019, you know, where like the whole city just got covered in like, that white explosive vapor cloud. That was insane. And the cloud from that tank is like a whole ammo storage went off.
That was insane.
I was watching that so normally too up until that point. I was like, it's another ammunition fire, no big deal. And then poof.
I see folks saying 6 tons of explosives in that tank. And if that's true, that was way too much to be carrying on one tank.
Good God. Wait a minute, hang on. You can actually see, these are Ukrainian soldiers. They fired an RPG at the tank, and that's what sent it off. Some people said that. I was looking for that. And you can see, and you can see the RPG fired right there. You can see it skim off of something, and then hit the tank. You know, that Ukrainian that fired that RPG probably just thought he hit a nuclear bomb with that thing. You know, he sat there and said, I'm going to get these bits. And then you hear,
yeah,
you
seriously.
know, it's like, oh my God.
Also, I see some folks saying that the Russians actually rigged it up to be that way, so that way they could drive it toward the Ukrainians. They would try to hit the tank, and it's basically like a suicide tank.
Dang. Well, I don't think they survived
that's
that.
a hell of a strategy right there. Good Lord.
And then using a $3.5 million tank for that, I mean, like, hell, you could just get a UAZ and probably do it cheaper. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip. We just watched a Russian tank go thermonuclear there, and we're now going to be moving a little bit behind the lines because the Russians are freaking out enough behind the lines that they were starting to commit friendly fire. We saw that they took out a Ural 4320 today that supposedly had an entire group of infantry in it when it was hit. Here's the clip. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at your nose.
Oh, Feather Frost.
And, Feather Frost, bled. What are we having for Christmas? Death by frostbite, bled. Oh, thank you, comrade. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip. And nice to see the Russians are conducting a little bit of friendly fire. And I gotta tell you, Matthew, really going back to that video, that fire did look pretty friendly. Like, if you watch it, look, you can hear it talking in the video clip. Hello, my name is James. What's your name? I mean, that's a pretty friendly fire right there, I gotta admit. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on into our next one a little bit further down the line and towards Volodar, where we saw a picture of a Panzerhaubitze 2000 firing. And what's so cool about this picture is you can see the wildflowers, you can see the Panzerhaubitze, and you can see the little 155mm shell. And when I say little, these things are actually really big, flying away from the tank and on into its way of glory. Some Russian soldier further down the range is going, oh, today is a great day. I'm probably not going to get blown up by a Panzerhaubitze 2000 smart shell airburst. You know, it's probably going to be fine. And then the Panzerhaubitze said, nah, comrade. But anyways, with that,
Isn't it a wonderful contrast, Liat, between the peaceful flowers and the destructive power of weaponry?
Dude, English teachers in American public schools be like, you see the juxtaposition of the heather flower and the nature and the calmness and the violent rages of humanity in the background. And then everyone in the class is going, man, why in the world am I here right now? And then the English teacher gets pregnant and they're gone for the rest of the year and you get a substitute.
Dang.
You know, like, it always happens like that. You never actually got to know your English teacher because they always just disappeared for the rest of the year after the first 2 months or so. Anyways.
I'm sure somebody can make a really nice haiku out of that, though.
I'm sure they could. I'm sure they could. I'm not going to lie. I think they probably could. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next clip where we saw the 47th Brigade using one of their American-provided Bradleys to fire at the Russians in night vision. You can see the Bradley rolling on forward. We now see them firing their 25mm Bushmaster at the Russians. And oh, they got him! Whoop, блядь! And with that, that's the end of that clip right there. But very nice to see that the 47th Brigade was able to use one of their Bradleys to get a confirmed kill. I don't know what they got a kill on, but we could see it explode. And great to see. Always love to see that kind of stuff, and it's good to know the Bradleys are being put to good use. Meanwhile, in the area around Volodar, we also saw some Russian equipment burning here. It appears that along the entire southern front today, the Russians have taken some pretty decent losses on film.
Oh, yeah.
Man, that's what the Russian crew members sound like after their tank gets hit. They go, "Ah!"
That's the sound after you kneecap yourself on a trailer hitch.
Dude, that's the sound that you make when you're trying to pass a kidney stone. Ah! You can see them hitting a Russian vehicle there. It's up in flames now. Oh, they had a little Vasylivka in that thing. Well, Vasily, that didn't pose too well, did it? And now they're dropping a bomblet on it to finish it on off. Exploding right near the rear of the MTLB. We now see them hitting it again. This time the Vasylivka's ammo is now going up in flames. And man, right now, some Russian commander out there, he's going, everything's fine, all right? We're not doing that bad. And he went, we lost our last MTLB today. And he went, ah! I don't want to report that to command, blast. Well, you don't. You just don't tell them. What do you mean? Just don't tell them. We never lost an MTLB as far as they know. And now you see
You see all the parts and stuff like flying and jumping off of it when it blew up.
Wait, hang on.
It was like the Looney Tunes truck, boing, bing, boing.
Wait, hang
It's
on.
like stuff like flying off of it.
Let me get this real quick. Let me pull this sound up real quick because I know a lot of people get a laugh out of this. Let's see. I can't say it because it'll take away the fun of it. Let's see here. Oh, no.
Oh man, what was that?
Here we go. Lego's falling apart. That's what that thing looks like when it got blown
that
up.
Minecraft like skeleton sound.
Yeah. Oh man, but now we can see that MTLB rusting in the distance, and great to see that the 72nd Brigade was able to get themselves a little MTLB that was carrying a Vasylivka automatic mortar in that area of the front lines. With that, we're now going to be moving on north and into our location unknowns, starting off with our first clip showing a Panzermörser firing. Hans, get some Panzermörser. This was actually provided by Lithuania, but Panzermörsers are M113s that have been refitted, or, largely refitted, to carry a 120mm mortar in the crew compartment, or more so the infantry compartment, and you can use it as a mobile artillery piece. Here's the clip. Oh, I thought that was someone talking. Do that, Charlie. But we can see them firing the mortar. And nice to see that they're using those Lithuanian-provided Panzermörsers to get themselves some pretty effective fire. With that, we're now moving on to our next clip, where we saw a Miklik in use. This is also what happens if you ever, lick Mickey Mouse. It's called a Miklik. But anyways, here's the clip. We can see that the charge has most likely already been laid out, and they're about to start laying out a Russian mine. Oh!
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. Very nice to see. Love to see it. And hopefully, that was able to clear a minefield or two. With that, we're moving on to our next clip, where we also see that a Russian T-80 was destroyed.
Dehotovo.
Damn.
I mean, was he recording on an iPhone microphone?
Dude, they sat there and they said, what would you like? I would like ear grape, please.
Dehotovo.
My ears, they're bleeding. And we now see the T-80 out there. We can see the commander crawling out of his hatch.
Also, by the way, we're less than 50 away from 6K, by the way.
real trap. That's what you gotta say.
Walk with your boys.
We make it look
Razom
easy.
for Ukraine.
We try and make it look easy. Walk with your boys. Damn, son, where'd you find this? We are $42 away, actually. So we're not that far from reaching $6,000. But with that, getting back to the clip, we can see the FPV drone coming in on the T-80. And we can see it getting hit in the distance from this drone. And we can now see the tank go on fire. Oh, we can see the Russians trying to bail, and it looks like they are bailing out. You know, Matthew, every single time one of these Russian tanks blows up like this, all of the Russians are reminded of Karl Marx's sister.
What's he had a sister?
Yeah, actually, he did have a sister. Her name was Anya, and she actually ended up being one of the first female track runners in the entire world, believe it or not. And to this day, they actually honor her name every single time a race starts by saying Anya Marx. And it appears that every time a Russian tank blows up, they're always reminded of Karl Marx, pretty much like super athlete sister. And so with that,
man, get the hell out of here.
Get the hell out of here. But anyways, with that, that's the other clip of that T-80 being destroyed. Of course, very nice to see. With that, we're now going to be moving on to a clip of a Ukrainian BMP moving through the beautiful countryside. I can't play the audio on this one, but this is the Ukrainian countryside and what it looks like. It kind of looks like Western England a little bit. Really nice, I have to say.
That dirt is like perfectly orange and dirt colored.
And, you know, I wish we could see the back of the tank. And we never did. It looked well packed, actually. Like, there wouldn't be that much dust from it, you know? I'm just kind of getting a feeling from that. I'm having a feeling that anyone riding behind this thing wouldn't be going, you know, I have a feeling it's like some very thin dust back there. But still, a really beautiful countryside. And it's really picturesque. I mean, like, that's really nice to be fighting in. And now it's time for the English teacher to return. You see, they're about to go into the horrors of war, and this is foreshadowing in the book that their lives will never be as natural and peaceful as it is today. Hop, and it looks like I'm on maternity leave. See you all. Here's the substitute. She'll be here for 9 months. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on from that last bit of Location Unknown news and on into our final bit where we saw the Russian casualty report for the day. And it is getting a little bit on up there. And we can see that Brenda Bamberger? Wait, hang on.
Is that a question?
Wait, yeah, I was like, I think I've heard something similar to that before, something that sounded like hamburger. But we can see that they put two Bobcats for Matt and 2 helicopters for me.
Hey, let's go. It's lit.
That thing be lit. Let's see the more replies. Oh, we got one from Tesseract. That's like the Tesseract. And we can see
he's got a tracked Bobcat and a wheeled one.
Yeah, man, I like that. And we can see Melissa Smith. Hey, Melissa Smith is back. Putting in
it's the Wojak.
Putting in the crying Russian Wojak blade. Very nice to see. And we can also see the deities of the memes. Very sad. But still, still, we get more memes about the Bobcats than there were Bobcats destroyed. There was 2 of them destroyed. Of course, very nice to see. We also saw that 650 Russian soldiers ended up biting the dust today, along with 23 armor personnel carriers. They also lost 14 supply trucks, 7 tanks, 13 artillery pieces, 7 drones, an MLRS, 2 helicopters, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. I gotta say, pretty decent losses across the board. Not that bad. Not that bad. We're now going to be moving on from the Location Unknowns and on into the rest of our frontline news. Starting off in the northeast, where we saw near the town of Zalaman, a Russian SPG, a 2S3 by chance, was destroyed. Man, and that's what the Russians say whenever they're trying to do a corrupt dealing, where they sit there and go, hey, you give me 2 of those and you reported this as 3 on your roster. And then the Russian quartermaster goes, oh, why would I do that? And then he goes, 2 is 3. And then he's like, oh, very good sense. Here you go. He's like, here, take it. And we can see the 2S3 right down there. Crikey, mate. That's a 2S3. What are we going to do about it? All right. We're going to bring in the drone.
It says land now. I think they'll oblige them on that.
Man, they're about to.
Oh, get a little piece of non-color footage for a second.
Oh, listen.
Oh.
oh,
Oh, they're running.
They went, oh my god. My life is flashing before my eyes. The Russian news, they never tell me about these. And so we can see them all running. And it's coming right in. Oh, hit right on the turret.
Oh.
That's probably an ammo detonation if I've ever seen one. And...
They are running.
They're running. And here comes the drone. And...
Oh my goodness.
Ammo
that
detonation
last dude.
on the spot. Yikes. The ammo's stored in the turret, so as soon as that FPV drone missed the hole and hit the turret instead, that was going to be an immediate ammo detonation. So those guys ran into a little bit of bad luck there. And man, that thing... Good lord, it's like a steel mill up in there, man. It's just shooting sparks everywhere. Very nice to see the Ukrainians were able to wipe them out. Because that SPG is not going to be operating again, most likely. And, you know, I never want to say anything definitively, though, because I can always be proven wrong. But I have a feeling that that one probably won't be working anytime soon. Well, that's the end of the clip. And very nice to see they're able to take out a Russian SPG in the area. We're now going to be moving on down into Bakhmut. And over the past 24 hours, we have seen that there haven't really been that big of advances in the area of Bakhmut, at least according to the Deep State map, which we can see right here. However, we did see that the Ukrainians are still pushing forward and still attempting to fight in the area. For example, we saw an international group of fighters fighting within what appears to be the very outskirts of Bakhmut again. It appears they've pushed all the way back up to it. Or, I'll say this, it may be a bit of an older clip. And also that's why I don't go down into Reddit comments, because you can see the curse words are flying in Reddit comments. It's almost like the Navy down there. It is full of people who act like they have to put one curse word behind every other normal word. And so I usually try and avoid...
That's why they say cussing like a sailor.
Man, cussing like a sailor. Yeah, I'm telling you.
Oh, try to draw their over here instead of over here.
Well, that wasn't really
that was
clear. How the hell is he even supposed to know which way's over here and over here? He didn't even say over here and over there. We've hit the dusty trail. He just said over here and over here. It's like, but that's the same here, though. It's like you gotta have one place that's here and one place that's there. You see the soldier continuing to fire his AR. And it's probably an M4, but we're going to call it an AR. We can see one also firing his machine gun.
Damn, the base boosted explosions.
The Russians are dropping the base boost on them. They're just saying they're deep fry them and put the base boost on them. Wait a minute, we're turning them into memes? Yes, Vadim, that's a war crime. I don't care. Drop the base boost, please. See, the area is filled with smoke from the shelling. We now see them moving out of the building. Of course, the air filled with smoke from the explosions.
This guy's a maul on the front of his rifle. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually. I gotta admit. You now see them running through the smoke. Oh, he tripped and fell.
Oh,
and he's getting back up. No! Everyone's tripping and falling. Apparently, there's just wires all over the ground through here. And they've now made it to the building. We now see them getting down into the basement of another building. We now see the footage continuing at a later date. It appears that they're moving through the crater. And he's tripped and fell again.
Down.
Apparently there's rebar sticking out everywhere, and they're not really seeing it until they pretty much step over it already. Mr. Attitude said, "You run on Rebel." No one's dissing on him. I'm just saying he's tripping. You hear the firefight still continuing.
Oh, did he just point that rifle right at his face?
I couldn't really tell. We can now see them getting back into the basement.
Talk to him, no, we talked to him.
We now see them running across the open again to another building. And now moving on
Hey,
into another building.
Sharon Flynn got the donation issue fixed. She put in a 100. Very generous.
Holy moly! We're up to 6.4! Hey!
I'm last man. Go, Nova, go! Rear! Cover the rear!
We now see them on the move again, as more artillery continues to land down on top of them.
Last man, last man.
And it appears that they may be trying to disengage Russian forces here at the end of this clip.
Do we know who these guys are? Like, are they Americans?
I believe they are Americans. From the caption, it's the Rogue Team from the quote-unquote Rogue Team International Legion unit fighting in Bakhmut. So I believe they're all Americans. How does it feel to be an all-American? We see them moving on. The artillery kind of chasing them for the most part. We see artillery practically exploding on top of them as the unit continues to try and move out.
Last man.
Oh, wow. Are they in a school?
I think they may be.
Friendly, friendly. Блять, это пиздец, Волча! Move. Волча, там тяжелый. Move, no. Там тяжелый, блядь.
We see them tending to a wounded soldier on the floor, and that's the end of the clip. But you got to give a lot of credit to those guys in the International Legion who are continuing to fight for a country that isn't theirs for the sole purpose of defending what's right in this world. And there's not a lot of people who do that out there. A lot of people end up, when pressure gets tough, they just back off and, you know, turn a cheek. And it's great to see that there are some brave people out there in the world, like those in the International Legion, who step forward and will face down evil and wicked folks and fight them on the battlefield itself. Great to see. And with that, we're now going to be moving on to Kakhovka, where we saw some fighting happening in this area. Now, one thing I would like to mention real quick, because I just saw this, in case of any of y'all wonder, every once in a while during clips like that, I try and see if there are any comments on videos that would probably be interesting to try and incorporate into the stream. And I just looked at our YouTube channel, and when we started running this stream tonight, we had around 124,000, and let me actually see if I can go back and find that number real quick. Let me go see. We had something along the lines of 123,500 or so people who were subscribers on this channel. Over the course of this stream, another 220 of y'all have joined this channel. And I don't know what is up with that. That's actually an incredibly high number, but I got to thank everyone who's joined the channel so far and has subscribed. And I've got to thank y'all so much for finding us worthwhile to subscribe. Very rarely when we are running a live stream like this do so many people end up subscribing to our channel. And I'm highly honored to know that many of y'all, apparently new people, have found this channel to be a high quality source of news tonight and have decided to subscribe. And I was just wanting to take a moment real quick to address you folks and thank y'all for subscribing to this channel and wanting to stick with us as we cover this news. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next clip in the Kakhovka area, where we saw fighting once again as they try and clear the canal area. And also, I'm going to have to mute that because that's copyrighted, in case y'all don't know. But we can see them laying down some machine gun fire there. And we now see them clearing out some outposts here and going inside of them and clearing them out a little bit more. We now see them firing
for good measure.
Yeah, just a few bullets for good measure, Governor. We can now see them firing their grenade launcher once more. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but it's very nice to see that they are, once again, clearing the canal area. We also got more extended footage, once again, from the 3rd Brigade in the area, showing them fighting there. And so, here's the clip. Well, he can't laugh, this is a war!
Будто какой-то Battlefield, понял? Тупо, блядь, Call of Duty.
We see them walking by a destroyed car. Don't know whose side that belonged to.
Машинка новая, кому, пацки? Поздравляю тебя на перший.
This guy sound crazy.
Рюкзак наш, пидоров. Это наш, вроде. Пидорасы, блядь, каски, смотри, сука, гандоны, нахуй. Беркут упиздил далеко и перевыше уже спросил.
Oh! Oh! Matthew! It's a victory MRE!
Really?
Yeah, you know that stupid MRE that the Russians gave out on the 9th of May? There's the carton for one of them. I've never seen those on the lines.
Well, that is cool.
That is cool, and that means that that's been there since May 9th. Like, right outside of this bunker. They just threw it out of the bunker opening, and it's been there since the 9th of May. It's honestly in kind of good shape, and it really begs the question, what the hell are the MRE packages made out of in Russia? Because that thing hasn't even, like, looked like it's gotten weathered at all at this point.
Дальше штурмовать. Это чья? Что это, блядь?
And we now see them moving around an abandoned Russian camp. We can tell it's Russian because of the amount of garbage.
I was about to say, if that's Ukrainian, that's very unusual.
Yeah, they keep their positions very clean.
О, тут плохо, мы сейчас именно четко крыем.
Now see them firing their grenade launchers. And now reloading their grenade launcher. Wiggling out the old cartridge and putting in a new one.
Я надеюсь, это снимаю сейчас. Этот экшен. Шо, Куля, куда? Ой, эта пружина куда?
Сейчас прямо получилось на 12.
Now see him aiming the grenade launcher again.
Левее, да?
Все, пока стрелял? Да.
And we now see them firing. Boom.
А ну, пружина, скажи, куда цепишь? Пружина. Что видишь там?
По траншеи, да, стреляет там где?
Да? Хай остынет.
You now see them setting up their machine gun. Oh my god, I wish I had that. It's like some kind of like a rubber thing that you put over the charging handle to make it easier. Oh my god, I wish I had one of those. Yeah, I wish I had one of those so much because our little AK that we have, Matthew, that thing, I hate that little charging handle. It's just so small. It's like you have to use like a pinky finger on that thing. I like that.
You could always just wrap it with some like electrical tape or something too.
That would be really Russian of me to do that, wouldn't it?
It would fit the AK look.
Sit there, Vadim, quick, whip out the bloody bandages. I'll use that. That's so smart. We see them firing the grenade launcher still and firing their AKs. Is that a Hollow Sun?
It is. I was about to say that.
That is a Hollow Sun. I actually have a Hollow Sun. I've never actually
That
used
exact
it.
one, actually, I think.
It's exactly that model and everything. Well, it's good to know that the Hollow Suns stand up to the battlefield conditions.
На, нахуй.
And then the Ukrainian soldier immediately countered me in the video by going, nah. He's like, nah, it doesn't.
Sure.
We now see them reloading the grenade launcher again.
Нормально.
As they joke around a little bit in between the firefights.
Надо еще раз туда бога кинуть, и я хочу туда прямо, блядь.
Now see him firing the grenade launcher again towards the Russians.
Прям в неё, братан.
Sounds like he was pretty happy with that hit.
Получай, сука! Прям в окоп, нахуй. Ёбаный я меткач.
Sounds like therapy
А
for
ну
this man.
проверяйте, птичка.
You now see them firing their machine gun and grenade launchers again.
That little thunk is very satisfying.
I know, it's so nice, right? It makes me want to go get a tank stamp. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But really cool to see the Ukrainian units in operation in the Bakhmut area and hopefully pushing the Russians back. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on a little bit behind the lines in the Donetsk area, where we also saw a Russian ammo warehouse being destroyed here as well today. Whoa. Now that is epic music. And we can see the Russians using this little facility here. And we can now see the Ukrainians making sure the Russians will no longer use this facility, getting in some pretty accurate strikes on the two outer buildings. We can now see some ammo catching on fire in this tree line here and spreading some burning hot embers around the flammable trees, as opposed to the non-flammable, fireproof trees. And we can now see the ammunition throwing out some burning hot sparks and explosions, mostly going to cause a fire. Well, it's already a fire, but you'll get what I mean. It's going to cause a wildfire. Oh! Dude, you know what that looks like? That looks like one of those old live leak videos from China where there's like a workplace accident in the steel mill. That looks like that.
Pretty close.
Yeah, it looks pretty close. Pretty much the same thing, you know, China trying to make steel, Russia storing ammo, pretty much the same thing. Bad results altogether. That ammo warehouse is gone. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there, but nice to see that they got another Russian ammo depot in the Donetsk area. We're now going to be moving on into the direction of Avdiivka and Kamyanka, where we saw some Russian forces being wiped out in this direction as well. Izagu!
Oh, yes. That's like Starsky's band, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Not a bad band, by the way. If y'all ever heard the music, it's actually not that bad. But we can see them moving up to the Russian outpost here. Damn, okay, seizure-inducing, thank you. Like, damn, I almost feel like I got a seizure from that. And now we can see the bomb falling right into the trench. Now with that, that's the end of that clip, but nice to see that the 109th was able to take care of another Russian outpost. That's all we saw in the Donetsk area today as well. Nothing else happened there, rather than that one bomblet being used, at least on film, and that's all we really had to show from that location. But with that, it is now time for us to move on all the way up to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who has never failed to have a day's war summary. Actually, he has a couple of times, but that's only when he's traveling from one country to the other. But with that, here is the address from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on the 480th day of the war.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці.
Speech.
Завершується цей тиждень, дуже важливий для нас, усіх тиждень, для нашої оборони, для наших кроків вперед, для наших наступальних дій. І саме час подякувати усім нашим воїнам, тим, хто відзначився саме цього тижня. Таврійський напрямок найбільш жорсткий, морпіхи 35-ї окремої бригади, дякую вам. Десантники 79-ки, дякую. 130-й окремий розвідбат, дякую. 68-ма окрема єгерська бригада, дякую. 23-я окрема механізована бригада, дякую. Артилеристи 44-ї бригади, дячен вам. Особливо відзначу роту ударних безпілотників 47-ї окремої механізованої бригади на чолі з головним сержантом Рустамом Мустафаєвим. Дякую за результат, воїни. Екіпаж броньованої машини розмінування 70-го окремого полку підтримки. Старший сержант Микола Нікандров та молодший сержант Роман Лісін. Молодці хлопці. Наша Нацгвардія дякую всім вам. Особливо відзначу головного сержанта Василя Ковиліна та командира взводу Дениса Зеленого, 4-й батальйон оперативного призначення, 1-ша президентська бригада Нацгвардії. Дякую. Хлопці виконують завдання на Луганщині під Білогорівкою. Наші прикордонники, особливо відзначу Луцький та Львівський прикордонні загони, старший солдат Василь Куцик. Авдіївський напрямок дуже ефективний у відбитті штурмів. Дякую. Сержант Вадим Дружина. Сіверський напрямок успішно мінусує солдатів і техніку ворога. Дякую. І, звичайно, наші захисники неба. За тиждень більше сотні групових авіаударів по позиціях і тилах ворога. Дякую. Наші пілоти. Знищено за 7 днів майже 3 десятки ракет і близько півсотні ударних дронів, а окремо відзначу оборонців неба Київщини, 96-та Київська зенітна ракетна бригада повітряних сил. Дякую. Всі калібри та кінжали під час цих атак були знищені. Отже, життя наших людей були врятовані. І, до речі, я хочу сказати кілька речей. Перше, хто б там в Росії не розказував, нібито наші Петріоти знищені, всі вони є, всі вони працюють, всі вони збивають російські ракети і збивають максимально ефективно. Жодного Петріота не знищено. Друге, усі ви бачили, як пройшов візит делегації лідерів та представників країн Африки, візит в Україну, візит в державу, потім в державу терориста. Делегація мала змогу побачити, хто насправді зацікавлений у мирі, а хто насправді сам по собі війна. Це було дуже чітко. Все, про що говорилося в Україні, було про формулу миру. Пункт за пунктом. Увесь зміст. Все, про що говорилося в Росії, було про війну, про те, як знищувати життя далі. Очевидна річ, немає альтернативи формули миру. Добре, що світ все більше і більше це чує і бачить. Третє, що стосується держави-терориста. Що їх єдине зараз має хвилювати, як підготувати їхнє суспільство, російське суспільство, до того, що вони втрачатимуть все те, заради чого знищують майбутнє своєї держави. Захоплені території Росія втрачатиме. Нашим крокам для деокупації немає і не буде альтернативи. Наші військові рухаються. Позиція за позицією. Крок за кроком. Йдемо вперед. Був цього тижня Рамштайн. Головне – це швидкість постачання. Наступного тижня будуть нові важливі комунікації з партнерами. Саме заради нашого руху, саме заради зброї, саме заради того, щоб у наших воїнів було все. Все необхідне. Я дякую кожному і кожній, хто зараз в бою, на позиціях, на бойових постах. Я дякую усім, хто допомагає. Слава Україні!
And with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And Slava Ukraini.
Mic unmuted.
And with that, it is now time for us to start moving on into our polls, because many of y'all have been asked some leading questions of the night, and of course have had a lot of answers to them, loads of answers, as a matter of fact, and a lot of y'all have actually put in y'all's input. But before we get to that, I would like to thank all of y'all so much once again, because of course, while we try and mask the shift now in between the news segment to the question segment, a lot of y'all already know what's coming, because, you know, a lot of y'all already dropped off during the speech. But before we move on into that question segment, I want to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for getting this fundraiser up to $6.4 thousand raised tonight, which is absolutely incredible, and once again is going to help save loads of lives through Razom to Ukraine. I also have to thank, I don't even know what the hell that was supposed to be, man. I feel like that when they came through on the mic, like, I don't even, like, what's it? Already know what's coming, because, you know, a lot of y'all already dropped off during the speech. But before we move on into that question segment, I want to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for getting this fundraiser up to $6.4 thousand raised tonight, which is absolutely incredible, and once again is going to help save loads of lives through Razom to Ukraine. I also have to thank... it's like it picked up so weird on the mic, but anyways, it like Matthew said, yeah, and it was absolutely incredible to know that we've been able to once again blow through another fundraiser goal and help save lives throughout all of Ukraine in Razom. I'd also like to thank an equal number of y'all so much once again for watching tonight's news. 6.2 thousand of y'all were on at one point tonight watching tonight's news, and I'm greatly honored to know that so many of y'all find this channel to be a reliable source of news, and I gotta thank you all so much once again for watching so far tonight. We're about to be moving into our question segment and addressing questions from the live chat for the rest of the night, and I gotta thank you all so much once again for being a part of tonight's stream, helping out this fundraiser, and helping to save the lives of Ukrainians inside of their own country. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, another thing I'd like to say is that I thank so many of y'all for subscribing tonight. We're up to 123,732 subscribers, and when the stream started tonight, I believe we were in the 530s. And that means around 200 people have subscribed during the stream. I don't know what has led to that massive increase of a number. Usually we get about I think it's like 60 or 70 subscribers while we're live running these streams. That's our normal number, but we've gotten 200 tonight. I don't really know how to explain that. I just guess
all that publicity, man. All that free publicity, it adds up.
I guess it does, and I got to thank so many people for coming over here and subscribing to this channel and wanting to hear more from it. We've been doing this ever since the first day of the war. I actually started reporting because Matthew wasn't actually a part of the channel yet. He came in a month later, but I started reporting on this channel hour in to the war. As soon as the first missile exploded, we were actually live covering the news just an hour later. And then Matthew joined in about 30 days in, and we've both been running this since then, from around 450 days ago. And it's been absolutely amazing to go onto this journey with so many of y'all, with nearly 124,000 of y'all at this point, and to cover all of the news that's been going on in Ukraine, cover all of the amazing people who have been fighting over there and who have been a part of this war, and also find so many amazing people here on the stream with us as we've been fundraising to save the lives of as many Ukrainians as we possibly can. And it's just absolutely incredible from top to bottom. It is, of course, on top of that, incredibly impressive knowing, of course, what we go through behind the scenes recently, that so many people would come to this channel and subscribe, especially considering what we're dealing with over there, which we're not going to be going into because we said we would not. And also, to be honest, we sat there and thought about what was going on last night, and I sat there and thought, you know, it's normal for YouTubers in the YouTube world to sit there and cause beefs with each other. And for some reason, it always comes from the people who have pretty much nothing in their lives, really at all. And so they decide, I guess, in an attempt to try and come up with something to attack people who look like they do have something going on in their lives. So, you know, we're just going to move on from it. We're just going to keep on covering the news like we have been. And I got to thank you all so much once again for being a part of this. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our polls. And with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so before we get into our polls, real quick, I want to say that I'm very glad to see that Zelenskyy looks like he's much more energized tonight than usual. I was a little worried the other night. He looked a little peaked, but I'm glad to see it looks like he's gotten some rest. So, with that being said, first off, we're going to list off our top donors that we had since the last time we called them off. And up first, we have that 100 from Sharon Flynn, who just left for the night, but thank you, Sharon, once again for that very generous donation. We also have a 50 from Mike Smith, Rosalie Woolman, Michelle Michichi, I believe. Not very good at that, but sorry about butchering it. We also have a 50 from Steve Watkins, as well as BC Skyman and Neil Visinant, I believe. But thank you all, once again, for the generosity tonight. And also, once again, like we said earlier, big thanks to all the smaller donors as well that helped us reach $6,420 to Razom. Big thanks to you all. And with that being said, we are moving into our first poll, which says, UK intel says Ukraine and Russia are taking heavy losses and quote-unquote Russian defenses are relatively effective. And what are your thoughts? It looks like 42% said, that's concerning for Ukraine. 42% also said, it's the cost of the offensive. 9% said unsure, and 7% said, I'm not concerned at all. And on this one, I will say it's slightly concerning that UK intel, which is credible in my book, says that Russian defenses are holding up and they're relatively effective. Of course, the Russians have put all their resources into fortifying their defenses to prepare for the horde of Ukrainians coming toward them. But it looks to me like the Ukrainians are still taking losses which are probably unacceptable in their view. I think that'll probably change in the next coming weeks, but it's unfortunate to see in the meantime. But I guess it's an acceptable thing. It's kind of nasty to say that in this offensive. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, what happened? Reread the line.
The poll says UK intel says Ukraine and Russia are taking heavy losses and Russian defenses are relatively effective. And what are your thoughts?
I would say that Russian defenses are proving to be somewhat effective, at least compared to what's happened during the rest of the war. Compared to that, they are effective. Compared to what happened in Balaklia, what happened in the north, and also what happened in Kherson. So I would say they are getting a little bit more effective at this moment. And I would say that the Ukrainians are taking higher losses than normal. That was expected before this offensive began. We actually covered that in polls on stream, and we even said offensive losses will be high for Ukraine just because offensives like this are naturally going to be high, and they're also going into a well-fortified area. So I would say that that is most likely a true statement. that the Ukrainians are taking higher losses, and Russian defenses are proving to be a little bit more effective than they normally have been. Nonetheless, it doesn't waver my faith in the Ukrainian military or the Ukrainian nation that they will eventually be able to liberate this area. It's just that it will take time, much like they already knew beforehand and started telling everyone beforehand. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says Ukraine's policy is to withhold casualty reports. And does this affect the amount of support that they receive? 57% said, I don't think it has an effect. 18% said unsure. 13% said it negatively affects Ukrainian aid. And 13% said it positively affects Ukrainian aid. And to me, I'm kind of torn on this one. I'm going to say I'm unsure. If they were to release the casualty reports, I'm not sure if that would make people feel sympathy or pity for Ukraine and make them supply more weapons to them to fight off the Russians and give some sense of urgency, or if that would make people call for not supplying Ukraine with weapons because they think they're not doing a good job. I'm not really sure, so I'm going to remain in the 18%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's not a good thing for the Ukrainians to release their casualty reports. That never happened during the Second World War for any country involved. It's not good for public morale, and also it is not good as far as operational security goes, because you're letting the enemy know the exact number of forces that they have been able to knock out. And that gives them a better idea as far as planning goes about what they're really going up against and how long it may take for new forces to enter the line, among many other things. It's not good for the Ukrainians to publish that number, not just as far as foreign support goes, but as far as operational security goes. It is not good to publish those reports during a war. It's best to publish that after the war is over. So I would say it probably has no effect at all on Ukrainian support, because most governments probably understand that that is just a part of wars, that you do not list casualty numbers. Iraq and Afghanistan were fairly rare as far as war goes, because casualty reports would actually come out pretty much real time. Then again, Iraq and Afghanistan had fairly low casualty numbers, both in the 10 years we were there after the invasion of Iraq, and, well, around 8 years, 9 years really, but the 20 years we were in Afghanistan, there were also casualty reports that would come out of there on a relatively frequent basis. But those were more so at that point asymmetrical wars where people were being blown up by, VIEDs or VBIEDs, among other things. And so it wasn't like a war like this one where it really relied on morale, because it was just something that was kind of going on in the background for decades. But in a war like this, it's not good to publish casualty numbers, especially when it's a massive conventional war and the enemy can get a lot of information based off of your loss rates and loss numbers. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, released Ukrainian POWs report brutal conditions and extreme torture, and can anything be done to respond? And also, we have known this for a few months. That was pointed out earlier by a viewer as well. But there's been more POWs reporting the exact same treatment, and apparently it's getting worse, which is very unfortunate. It looks like 52% said yes, the international community can help. 31% said no, sadly there is nothing to do. 12% said I'm not sure, but maybe. And 5% said unsure. And in my view, unfortunately, unless we're planning to go and put boots on the ground in Ukraine and go to war with Russia directly, I don't see anything we can really do at the time being. Of course, we can hold them accountable after the war is over. But I would really like to put an end to that now, because that's very, very unfortunate to hear the atrocities happening in these POW camps by Russia. Ukraine lets outside observers into their camps where they're holding POWs to see how they're being treated. They're very transparent about it, but Russia will not let any observers in. So a very big double standard there, and not shocking from Russia. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, sadly, there's not really a lot that can be done. Of course, the Red Cross is usually the ones to do something like that if there was a problem with prisoner treatment. But then again, the Russians can hide that pretty easily, and you have to put yourself in the mindset of these POWs. They get tortured every day. The Red Cross says, we want to show up and take a look at the POW camps, and the Russians go, sure. So they dress these guys up. They make sure to hide their bruises if they have any, or visible signs of injury. And then they dress up their cells, and then the Red Cross shows up, and they tell them, if you say that you're being mistreated to the Red Cross, we're going to torture you even worse when they leave. And so then the Red Cross comes in and goes, so are you being treated fine? And that prisoner goes, yeah. So that way they're not tortured worse, and they're just tortured the same amount they were before the Red Cross arrived. Beyond that, there isn't really much more to be done. So sadly, this is just another sign of Russian barbarism as far as it goes. And there's not really a lot that the world can do about it, rather than just kind of hear the news coming in and understand that the Russians are brutal barbarians as far as it goes. And so with that, hope that does address that poll fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last poll says, what strategy should the West adopt if the Ukraine war drags on for years beyond the counteroffensive? It looks like 64% said long-term trickle support to Ukraine, 17% said short-term bursts of support, 16% said unsure, and 4% said start reducing support for Ukraine. And to me, on this one, I would personally say short-term burst of support is better. I think Ukraine has a much higher chance of winning against Russia in the short term than the long term. I don't think anyone wants to see this war drag out for many, many years. And I think we should go ahead and give them everything they're asking for now and hope that they can wrap this thing up in the next year or so. I think trickling the support will be a mistake. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that trickling the support would most likely be a mistake. I think that we should make sure to match the support to what they need in the war, not bursts or not trickles, but to make sure to match it, because if we start to trickle, they won't get enough support. They'll most likely start to lose the war eventually because of that. And if we give them short bursts of support, they may start to lose the war in between the short bursts. So we may just want to make sure to keep up a decent, prolonged, continuous support, so that way they can get enough that they need to be able to continue on fighting the war effectively. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we're all out of poll questions. So we're moving on to our live chat questions. We have a ton of really good ones, and our first one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who says, why would Russia be willing to destroy the power plant when it will affect them immediately?
It would affect them immediately, but it will also affect the Ukrainians immediately as well. It's kind of like a bank robber in Britain in the 70s robbing someone with a hand grenade. Obviously, it would kill both of them if he pulled the pin and held the guy near him. But nobody really wants to run the chance of that crazy guy pulling the pin and possibly killing both of them. And that's kind of what they're relying on right there. Is everyone goes, man, the Russians really are crazy. They could blow up that nuclear power plant. While it'll affect them, it'll also affect us greatly as well. And that's kind of why the threat is pretty bizarre, and it's looked at as like absolutely bat crap crazy, is that they would be willing to directly affect themselves nearly immediately to also affect everyone else. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question goes to Gabriel Mum, who says, if you could ask Putin 3 questions that he had to answer honestly, what would those 3 questions be?
That's a really interesting
That's a tough question, I gotta say.
That's a very interesting one. I don't want to sound cliche because, I'm sure that many people would have the same questions to ask. Probably the first one would be, what is the actual strategic reason for the war in Ukraine as far as 2022 went? Second one would be, would Russia actually withdraw if, would Russia actually sign a peace treaty if they were pushed entirely out of Ukraine? And the third question would be, would they withdraw from Ukraine immediately? Of course, the answer to that one would be no. That one's already honestly being answered. But those would probably be my 3 questions that I could come up with off the top of my head to ask. Of course, they're probably not the best ones, but still, that's what I would ask them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Plexus Gaming, who says, with how the counteroffensive is developing, do you agree that it looks like Mariupol is one of the Ukrainian targets?
It looks like it may be. It actually looks like they're going for 2 targets at the same time, Mariupol and Melitopol. So I would say yes. I would say that Mariupol is probably one of those targets. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question goes to Red's Vet, who says, what happens if they fire the missiles on the truck on the roof? Hopefully it collapsed.
I don't think it would collapse, but it probably cause a lot of damage to the roof. Because the Pantsir is actually designed to where, and let me Pantsir, S1, there we go. I'm sure we'll find a War Thunder picture immediately. Oop, there we go. War Thunder picture. Boom. Right there. But the Pantsir is actually designed to fire the missiles over to the side, or it can actually be fired right over the truck itself, and the truck is actually made to survive a little bit of that backblast from those missiles. So it probably wouldn't cause that much damage to the Ministry of Defense building, but it would still be hilarious to see if it actually did cause damage. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Chances of damage, most likely somewhat low. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to TH Man, who says, why doesn't Ukraine attack them where they ain't?
Ukraine tries to attack them where they ain't. But it's really hard to attack them where they ain't because there's guys everywhere where they are. To try and answer that the best I can. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $50 donation from Brian's Thailand, who brought us up to $6,486 of our $5,000 goal. So thank you, Brian, very much for that very generous support and helping us to get closer to well above our goal. I don't know where I was going with
6.5.
that. But anyways.
6.5.
Yeah, that works. But anyways, up next we have a question from Laverne Powers. He says, does Russia realize they helped start World War II and that we gave them gifts to help win the war? And what do you think?
Yes, they realized that they were kind of a beginner of World War II. You see, World War II wouldn't have begun, most likely, if the Soviets hadn't gotten involved in Poland and actually, I guess you could, largely allied themselves with the British and the French at the very onset and said, no, don't do that. The Germans probably wouldn't have gone into the Second World War, or they would have, and it would have been a very bad footing because they already would have been fighting two wars on two fronts, which wouldn't have boded them well. So yes, they did kind of start the Second World War, and we helped to support them massively. We ended up providing more trucks to them than they actually produced throughout most of the war. Well, supply trucks, tanks, and other things. And that really did help them out a great deal in being able to win the war. If it wasn't for that support, the Russian army most likely would have never been able to recover from the blistering defeats they got in 1941 and 1942, and they would have never been able to make that rebound that we saw. They probably would have ended up just bleeding themselves dry right outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg for maybe a few more years while the West landed in France and then began their push in that direction. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, once again, shout out to Brian's Thailand. He put in another $50 donation and brought us up to $6,544. So now we're above that $6,500 mark that the enforcer just mentioned. So big thanks to you. And moving on to our next question, we have one from, let's see here, Random Name, who says, have you guys covered the dreaded Russian Dolphin Navy?
Yes, we have. We actually have covered the Russian beluga navy and talked about how they trained whales and other kinds of sea creatures to do the Russian military's bidding. We have actually talked about that before. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Private Public 77, who says, did Mr. Lunchtime die because everyone else is starting to get fat?
I think he may have, because it looks like the portions are increasing in size, and we can only say that the best reason for that would be that Mr. Lunchtime has finally croaked. I don't know from what it was, whether it be diabetes or what, but he did certainly croak. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John Underwood, who says, I was just wondering, how much does a Panzer weigh fully armed, and what would happen when it is fired, and would this not start Ted building on fire?
Ted building. Let's see here. What's the weight of this thing?
It's a wee bit tall, a wee bit heavy.
Wee bit tall and a wee bit heavy. For some reason, they don't want to tell us the weight. It's a fat bastard, I'll tell you that. I know it.
I suppose it's a lot heavier than Mr. Lunchtime. Oh my goodness.
It's a lot heavier. Pants your... oh, don't do that. Pants your S1 weight. 2.1 pounds. 2.1 pounds. This thing weighs the tenth of the weight of Mr. Corgi. But
it's a lightweight.
Let's see here. There's no publicly listed weights anywhere for a Panzer. It probably wouldn't set the roof on fire, probably because it's covered in tar. Well, actually, no, it probably would set the roof on fire because it is covered in tar. So if it was fired the right way, it may actually set the building on fire. I would put bets on it. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, real quick, we're having a small donation spree going on here real quick. Got to call out MH, who put in a very generous $90 donation to the fundraiser of the night, as well as Gene Kustra, who put in a $50 as well. So big thanks to MH and Gene for that very generous donation. And y'all brought us up to $6,697. So getting pretty close. I think we might actually hit the 7,000 mark before we end the stream tonight. Just saying. But Enforcer, would you like to add anything in?
Yes, I would. I would like to thank y'all so much for supporting this fundraiser and getting it on up there, because we're getting close to $7,000. And $7,000 is a pretty hefty amount to raise for Razom for Ukraine, and hopefully they'll be able to use it to help save lives inside of their own country. And so with that, thank y'all for helping to get that fundraiser up to that point, and hopefully we'll get on to 7,000 before the end of the night. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to O-Tubes, who says, I heard that the Russians have been, let's see here. This one is a little graphic. I'm debating whether or not I can read this one off. I think I might have to pass on reading this one off, O-Tubes, but it was a good question, and I'll probably have the enforcer answer that one in private instead. I'm not sure if you two would like us saying that live on the air. But with that being said, our next question goes to Fusha Kone, who says, after Big Z's speech, can the enforcer tell us the story of the USS Indianapolis? The July 30th anniversary is coming up.
Good story. And so, let me tell you the story of the USS Indianapolis. So, the USS Indianapolis was I'm trying to think, I think it was a Pensacola class cruiser, USS Indianapolis. And let me go find it here. It was a Portland class heavy cruiser, kind of similar to the Pensacola class, but a little bit different in some ways. And here's a picture of the Indianapolis in 1939, before the Second World War broke out. And I think it went through a refit, and so it looked a little bit different by the time it actually was destroyed. And let me see if I can find it. Here we go. And you can see it had a couple of upgrades on it. It appears that it actually got some kind of a radar on its rear mast. You can see that the rear mast was upgraded. And it also appears that the forward superstructure that the bridge was in also got an upgrade as well, from what we can tell right here. In 1944, the Indianapolis was actually tasked, and I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if it was 1944 or 1945. Let me make sure. Nope, I think it was. Yeah, it was 1945. Sorry about that. But in 1945, around the midpoint of the year, around July, the USS Indianapolis was tasked with transporting the nuclear bombs, or the atomic bombs, Fat Man and Little Boy, to, I believe it was, and I'm trying to think, I think it was actually Guam, and they were tasked to transport them to Guam, where they'd be loaded onto some B-29s, and the B-29s would set off, and then they would go nuke Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Of course, that would be given to the Enola Gay and, I believe, Boxcar, which was the other B-29 that no one really talks about, but those would be the two bombers that were used. The Indianapolis ended up successfully dropping off the atomic bombs at Guam, and then set off, I think, for another assignment in another area. It was tracked down by a Japanese submarine that ended up torpedoing the Indianapolis, and then the Indianapolis sank. Throughout the course of the ship sinking and then the ship's crew being recovered, the ship's crew, which was of course just adrift in the water in large clumps, was attacked viciously by the sharks in the area, and a lot of them ended up dying from the sharks and also from exposure in the sea. Eventually, they would be picked up, but most of them ended up dying from shark attacks, exposure, among many other things, and also drowning in the ship after it had been hit and began to sink. It was probably one of the worst stories to hear, and it actually survived in pop culture a pretty good deal. It was the inspiration for Jaws, actually, in a small way, and many of y'all may know the reference that was made in the movie Jaws by the captain of the little boat that they use in the movie, and he says there, I was on the Indianapolis, and the shark's eyes would wide over whenever they bit someone, you know, and that was the whole story there, and it was kind of inspired, the movie Jaws was kind of inspired by the Indianapolis. It was also inspired by great white shark attacks that occurred during the 1910s along the New England coastline, where kids just ended up dying in the middle of creeks, like in the middle of Massachusetts, from literal great whites. But that's a little bit
that
of
would suck if a damn great white showed up in a lake or like a stream or some junk.
Man, they did. It was actually crazy. That's probably even a crazier story than the Indianapolis, is that random kids just ended up getting mauled to death in like 1911 and 1912 by some great white shark that was just traveling all the way up these creeks, pretty much to where it was fresh water at that point, and just killing these kids. It was insane.
Couldn't the people like tell like there's a shark that's probably like flopping through the water, is just not deep enough, like up a creek?
No, these creeks were actually kind of deep. And let me see if I could pull it up. The damn, this happened a lot more than I thought it did. The Jersey Shore shark attacks in 1916. And we can actually see some of the sharks they ended up massacring after these kids got killed. But let me see if I can get you all the incidents and the victims here. This one was probably the craziest one, the one at Matawan, because it was so far inland, you know, and it was like, what the hell? But anyways, here's some of the stories. I'll just read it off as is because the stories are just interesting in their own right. Between the 1st of July and the 12th of 1916, 5 people were attacked along the coast of New Jersey by sharks. Only one of the victims survived, so 4 people ended up dying from this. The first major attack occurred on Saturday, July 1st at Beach Haven, a resort town established on Long Beach Island off the southern coast of New Jersey. Charles Epting Vanson, 28, of Philadelphia, was on vacation at the Ingleside Hotel with his family. Before dinner, Vanson decided to take a quick swim in the Atlantic with a Chesapeake Bay retriever that was playing on the beach. Shortly after entering the water, Vanson began shouting. Bathers believed he was calling to the dog, but a shark was actually biting Vanson's leg. He was rescued by lifeguard Alexander Ott by bystander Sheridan Taylor, who claimed the shark followed him to shore as they pulled the bleeding Vanson from the water. Vanson's left thigh was stripped of its flesh, and he bled to death on the manager's desk of the Ingleside Hotel at 6:45 in the afternoon. Despite the Vanson attack, beaches along the Jersey shore remained open. And this is what Jaws is actually based off of. It's based off of these shark attacks directly. Because you can see right here, like in the movie, someone just gets viciously killed amongst the swimmers, and then they go, "The beach remains open." What do you mean? You can't do that. It's literally what the movie is based off of exactly. Sightings of large sharks swimming off the coast of New Jersey were reported by sea captains entering the ports of Newark and New York City, but they were dismissed. Most likely to try and keep tourism running around these places. The second major attack occurred on Thursday, July 6th, at a resort town of Spring Lake in New Jersey. So the first one happened down here, second one happened up here, and then the third one would happen up at Mattawan. You can see that it was probably a lone shark. A lot of people think it was actually a single shark that ended up traveling its way up the Jersey coast and just bringing a wave of death and destruction wherever it went. But anyways, the victim was Charles Bruder, 27, a Swiss bell captain at the Essex and Sussex Hotel. Bruder was attacked while swimming 130 yards, which is pretty far offshore. A shark bit him in the abdomen and severed his legs. Bruder's blood turned the water red. Obviously, blood isn't blue. After hearing screams, a woman notified 2 lifeguards that a canoe with a red hull had capsized and was floating just at the water's surface. Lifeguards Chris Anderson and George White rowed to Bruder in a lifeboat and realized he had been bitten by a shark. They pulled him from the water, but he bled to death on the way to the shore. According to the New York Times, women were panic-stricken and fainted as Bruder's mutilated body was brought ashore. Jeez. I mean, that is a pretty brutal way to write that.
I can hear these Jersey people already yelling, "There's a shark in the water! Shark! Get out the water!
There's a shark in the damn water! Get out the water! What the hell are you doing out there?
What's that lazy devil doing out there, that shark?"
What's that damn shark doing out there? That bastard's like Uncle Tony. But anyway.
Is that my cousin Lone Shark?
I gotta tell you, I thought the mob was really taking a chunk out of me for protection. Man, that shark really took a chunk out of my brother, I'll tell you that. But anyway,
I get no respect.
Anyways, it was a massacre up there in 1913 from these sharks, and in response to it, after a decent amount of people ended up getting killed, the 4 of them got killed, then they went around and they went on a shark massacre around here and just ended up killing almost all the sharks in the area. But anyways,
that's when they started serving shark fin soup, I think, on the regular around Jersey.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe that was the case. Oh, for real? Are you about to say no? I'm just kidding.
Real.
After
no, I'm not being serious.
Oh, really? I'm not believing you, man. I'm not believing you on that one, man. But with that, hope that does address that story fairly well. And I know that's not really the Indianapolis story, but this one's also fairly interesting as well and kind of ties into Jaws. But anyways, with that, I hope we address that fairly well. And also, Matthew, I have to circle back. Are you serious about the shark fin soup thing?
I heard that somewhere. I don't know if you can verify it or not, but I heard after they started that shark massacre, they started stocking that in the restaurants, and shark fin soup was one of the main courses.
Did shark fin soup become common in New England? Let's see here, because I know it's a Chinese thing, and I was like, that would be something I could see happening in places like Chinatown and New York City, maybe at the time. But it doesn't really look like it actually caught on, at least, let's see, late 20th century, delicacy in China. So it appears they never really made it to New England, so that may have just been...
You see the jawline on that dude down there on the right?
Man, he can cut diamonds with that jawline. I'm not gonna lie, man. This man, they they sit there and go, all right, cut up the diamonds. They he just saw some diamonds. I'm like, goodness. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. It got to the bottom of that, sadly. It didn't become a popular thing in New England. But with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and our next one goes to Badger Resistance, who says, how does this offensive operation compare to Normandy's D-Day defense line?
It doesn't it doesn't actually compare too well, actually, because D-Day's defensive lines, while they were kind of large, you know, and they were only really one defensive line. Once you got off the beach, there was really no defenses behind that, rather than small flak batteries and maybe a couple of things like that. So I would say it doesn't really compare too much, because from what we understand, the Russians have actually built a defensive line that has defense in depth. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Richard Rohde, who says the Geneva Convention classifies destruction of dams as WMDs. And that would answer my question I had earlier when I was talking about it sounds like it was a small WMD. If it defines it as that, then that answers the question definitively. But sadly, I don't think Russia adheres to the Geneva Convention. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say Russia definitely doesn't follow the Geneva Convention, but I thank you for sharing that with us, because that does put that destruction of the dam in a whole other category rather than it just being a crime against humanity. It is clearly a war crime. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Duncan VR, who says, what damage could a Ukrainian F-16 squad do to the Russian Black Sea Fleet with the Slav Ukraine?
But I would say they'd probably be able to do a little bit of damage to the Black Sea Fleet. Probably wouldn't be a lot, because F-16s, I think, can only carry 2 anti-ship missiles at a time. And so they could probably end up getting a couple of those in, maybe hitting some of the larger ships, but they wouldn't be able to wipe out the whole fleet in a single go. That would mostly be something that would take several missions over several days to do, to be able to wipe out their entire fleet. And even then, they may not end up getting all of them. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John Stacy, who says, why don't we give Ukraine AC-130 gunships?
Oh, I know why. Those things are targets, huge targets. We ended up not even really using them in Afghanistan much, except for in nighttime missions, because even the Taliban and the Mujahideen could end up damaging the AC-130s if they tried to conduct daytime operations. And with the Russians actually having air defense, those AC-130s would be shot down like there was no tomorrow. It would practically be a turkey shoot, and it would be wasting valuable Ukrainian air crews to really achieve very little. So that's probably why they're not being sent over, because even the U.S. is seeing that the gunship principle, unless you're dealing with complete air superiority and the enemy you're going up against has no air defense, those things are practically useless and for a very niche kind of war. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Minuteman, who says, do you think America will allow Australia's FA-18s to be sent to the Ukrainians?
I don't think there will be any opposition to that. I think they probably will be able to send their F-18s to Ukraine. That's honestly what I'm thinking at this point, but who knows, because the U.S. waffles a lot, so they may change their mind tomorrow. Who knows? But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to our third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Robbie Phillips, who says, so way back when Russia was building the trench on the seashore, has anything come out of that?
Nothing's really come out of that. They built the massive trench works in Crimea, and now I believe they're going into a state of disrepair, because it appears that the few pictures we've ever gotten of them, no soldiers are around. They just kind of built them and they left them there. So it may be that they're just starting to fall into disrepair, and the Russians just wasted time, effort, and resources doing something they really didn't have to do. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Fuchsia Cone, who says, do you two want to visit our cousins in Ukraine post-hostilities? And I'll say for me, I personally want to go over there to Ukraine after the war's over. Also, I want to see all the Baltic states one day. I haven't got to go there yet, but I was watching a new Grand Tour episode that came out called Eurocrash. I'm halfway through it. Really good, by the way. And they were going through Poland, then they're going through Latvia and all these other places. And it looks very beautiful. I really didn't know how beautiful the entire country of Poland was until I saw that. And I definitely want to see all those countries now, especially Ukraine post-war. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I probably would like to go over to Ukraine and see it. Probably meet Starsky, meet everyone else that we've ended up covering the war with. It would be pretty cool to go over there and check it out. So I would say, yeah, I would like to do that. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Mike, who says, did Zelenskyy get got?
Zelenskyy. I believe he's actually the Ukrainian general. One second, Zelenskyy.
I think he is.
No, he didn't get got. He's still alive. They
But
said
he's gotten get.
He's getting them good, but they ain't getting him. So yes, he is still alive at the moment. And if you ever hear anyone saying that he's been killed, don't believe that until the Ukrainian government officially states that he's been killed, because that's happened about twice now, I think, over the course of the war, and both times were blatantly false. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank you all so much once again for being a part of tonight's stream and helping us to get this fundraiser to where it is. It is at $6,709 raised in support of Razom for Ukraine. That is an incredible number. That is an incredible number, and has certainly helped to save loads of lives through Razom. They've been over there for a great while and helping to support Ukraine and helping to support the people on the ground, and it is great to know that we were once again able to all come together and help support this fundraiser and send it well above the goal, nearly $1,700 above the goal, to help save the lives of folks over there. It's been absolutely incredible, and I got to thank you all also, nearly the 4,200 of y'all that are here right now, for watching this stream and enjoying it tonight. If y'all did enjoy it, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, and make sure to comment, because subscribing makes us pretty happy when we see that people have enjoyed this channel enough that they actually found it worthwhile to subscribe and keep updated with when we run the news. And we run this 6 days a week, every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And every single Sunday, you can see us running a Sunday night fundraiser where we help out a nonprofit that has been operating in Ukraine, like tonight. And so with that, good night. Good luck, stay safe, take care, long live the LSA, and Slava Ukraini.
And good night, LSA, Slava Ukraine, and like the shark on Jaws said, the Russians are blow up.
Blow up.
Yes.
The liberate army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.